Hello listeners, welcome back to Luke's English Podcast. It's very nice to be talking to you, very happy to be actually doing this episode finally. Before I pressed record and started this, I just spent ages faffing around, just not really getting anything done, just doing a lot of faffing. Do you know what faffing around means? It means kind of messing about, not really doing anything, just doing lots of things but achieving nothing. Sort of wasting time, it feels like, or at least just doing a lot of things that, I don't know, little annoying things that you don't even really need to do. Does that happen to you? If before you have to do something, do you spend ages faffing around? For example, before you have to leave the house, let's say you're going out of your house to do something in particular, like you're going on a little trip to the shops or something like that. Or popping out somewhere. How much time do you spend faffing around? Just kind of like, okay, I'll wear this jacket. No, actually, I won't wear that jacket. I think now I'm going to... I'll change the jacket and I'll need an umbrella, I think. And hold on, let me just stand here for ages checking the weather on my phone. And then before you know it, you've ended up on social media and you're looking through like Instagram or Facebook or something. How did this even happen? I'm just standing here in the hallway with a jacket over my arm and I'm just being distracted I'm just faffing around. I've got to just actually leave the house. It was a bit like that for me at the beginning of this episode. Just lots of faffing around, like trying to choose the right position for my chair, and then going, actually no, I'm not going to sit on this chair. I'll sit on the wooden stool instead. I'll swap them round. So I swapped them round, and then I thought, no, this is ridiculous. I can't just have this empty office chair in the background of this episode. That's just going to look really weird. So I'll move it outside into the hallway. That's what I'll do. I'll just move it outside. And then I tried that. It's just far too cumbersome, and I was crashing into the doorway, and then I realised it would block the hallway. So no, okay, bring the chair back in. Let's just get that sorted, and then make sure the camera's in the right position. Just make sure that the desk is all tidy and I don't have stuff. I'm not going to knock into things with my hand, for example, if I just for some reason do this. If I just move my hand while talking, I mean, who knows what I'll be talking about. I might need to move my hand in a sort of sweeping motion during the episode for some reason, and I wouldn't want to crash into anything, so I better just make sure that the table is clear, and then just so much faffing around. But I'm glad that finally I'm actually doing this. Yes, here we go. How are you doing, listeners? I hope you're doing okay. I'm recording this on a very gloomy and rainy Wednesday afternoon at the end of May 2024, and the weather should not be like this. It should be much nicer than this, right? I mean, this is supposed to be my favourite month of the year because the weather is normally really nice, sunny but not too hot, with the flowers in bloom and the birds singing and stuff. But it's just grey and miserable here today. I took a picture from my window, but you can check that there'll be a PDF for this episode, which you can download from the episode page. Just check the link in the description wherever you're listening to this, and you'll be able to see the picture that I posted. But I mean, you don't even really need to. You don't really. It's just a picture of grey skies. You can't really see the rain, but there's just a general sort of disgusting downpour of rain happening, and it's been like this all day. So anyway, I suppose the conditions are just right for doing an episode of this podcast, for staying here and doing this. This is a rambling episode. I think you know the score. I think you know what that involves. Let's start looking at the PDF now then, shall we? And as I said, you'll find a PDF for this on the page for this episode on my website. You don't need to check it, right? You don't have to. But if you want to, you can. And you can see a lot of the notes and scripts and stuff that I've prepared already for this. This episode was supposed to be a kind of no preparation needed episode, a rambling episode, because I mean, I'm as you heard in the last, like 2 episodes ago, May is a very busy month. I'm trying to get as much podcasting work done as I can, but it can be a little bit difficult in this month because there are lots of public holidays and stuff, and so my time is quite tight this month. And so I've been working on lots of new episodes, but none of them were quite ready to be published when an episode needs to be published. And so I'm doing a rambling episode because the idea is that they don't require too much preparation. I can just kind of like do one fairly quickly and fairly efficiently. But I say that, but then I just spent the entire morning, as I said before, faffing around, preparing a bit more. Just like, I think I'll add a bit more to my notes, and I'll add a bit more, and I'll add a bit more, and then eventually, okay, I'll just make this a PDF, and then people can download it. Right. So let's start looking at that PDF, which I prepared earlier, shall we? As I said, you don't have to. You can just enjoy listening. All right, then. So if you want to look at the PDF with me, you can. I'm going to start reading from it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Episode 885. I don't know what the name of the episode will be at this point. I'm going with the working title, the very clever working title, Episode 885. Wow, the level of creativity and imagination at work here it's, I'm firing on all cylinders, everyone. Okay, hello. So while I work on some other episodes, which I have in the pipeline, here is another rambling episode for you. The plan for this episode is I'm going to give you your regular dose of English listening practice. I'll give you some podcast news and updates. I'm going to give you some stand-up comedy dates, which means dates when I'm performing stand-up comedy in Paris, because people do ask me that sometimes. They say, hey, I'm coming to Paris. When can I see you performing stand-up? Are you performing stand-up soon? Or maybe even, I live in Paris. Can I come and see you perform? Well, I'm actually going to give you a couple of dates of good shows that you could come to. I'll give some comments relating to recent episodes and answer some questions from listeners. And this will include things like this: whether I give one-to-one lessons, transcripts on Spotify, what LEP Premium actually includes, the vocabulary workshop I did on Zoom a few weeks ago. I'm going to talk about that. How can you see the recording of it? Some thoughts about accents and pronunciation from the Barbara Serra interview a few episodes ago. Why some episodes perform better than others on YouTube. The crucial difference between a viaduct and an aqueduct. That's a vocabulary question, something I needed to clarify after talking about that on the podcast recently. Obviously, vitally important that you know the difference between a viaduct and an aqueduct. I suppose there are some situations in which that would be very important, right? Maybe if you're in a canoe and you need to cross a canyon, and you're in a canoe, and you there's a bridge up ahead, and you ask a person, it's like, can I cross that bridge? And you go, well, yeah, that's what, that bridge over there, it's a viaduct. Like, does that mean there is water or there isn't water? Well, I'm going to explain in a little bit. I'll talk a little bit about learning music and teaching it to my kids, and I'm planning to give you a little tour of the guitars in my room, and this is after a listener asked me about that. I'll also talk about my intentions for upcoming episodes of this podcast, and a look ahead at the summer on Luke's English Podcast. And finally, there should be a song on the guitar, perhaps with some comments and explanations about the lyrics. And that'll be at the end of the episode, just so that you don't, just so I don't impose it on you too much. If you want to hear me sing a song, you can listen keep listening until the end. If that's not your cup of tea, you could stop before the singing and just happily go about your day without feeling that you've really missed too much. So that sort of thing, that's the kind of stuff that I will be talking about in this episode. How long will this take? Well, how long is a piece of string? You might think, what? What's that, Luke? What are you talking about? That's just a phrase that people say in English when they're trying to measure what's the meaning of how long is a piece of string. It's kind of one of those annoying things that, like, your parents would say if you ask them a question that doesn't really have an answer. Like, how long will this episode be, Luke? Well, how long is a piece of string? And, that just means we don't really know. We don't really know how long a piece of string is. Surely you just measure it. But anyway, it's just a turn of phrase. How long is a piece of string? Hold on a minute. Let me have a look at this. Now I've mentioned it, I feel like I need to at least talk about it a little bit. This is from Lexical Lab, which is a great website run by a really good English teacher called Hugh Deller. So I just ended up on lexicallab.com. And Hugh Deller often covers things like this, sort of phrases and expressions. So, how long is a piece of string? Obviously, a piece of string can be as long or as short as you want it to be. It depends. And the rhetorical response, how long is a piece of string, is designed to make this clear to the person who asked the initial question. So, it can be as long or as short as you want it to be. Okay. Anyway, so how long will this episode take? Well, how long is a piece of string? It could be long, it could be short. You know, it's kind of up to you, really. If you feel like you need half an hour's worth, listen to half an hour and then stop. And then come back later and listen to a bit more. You know, it's up to you. So, podcast news and updates. So, first of all, good news. I have no plans to stop doing this anytime soon. All right, so don't worry if you've written a comment under one of my episodes recently saying, please don't give up, please keep doing this, please never stop this. Don't worry, there's no suggestion that I'm going to stop. Everything's fine. I'm going to carry on as normal as I have been for the last 15 years. Okay, so it's all good in the hood, as they say. Premium listeners, hello. P60 parts 1 and 2 were released at the end of last week. Check them out. Okay, so if you're a premium Lepster, check out P60 parts 1 and 2. They should just be there in your episode list in your podcast app of choice. What are they? They are vocabulary reviews, vocabulary review episodes for the Walk and Talk Paris episode I did a few weeks ago. And like in most premium episodes, what I've done is gone through that entire Walk and Talk episode and picked out certain bits of English, bits of vocabulary, phrases, phrasal verbs, expressions, verbs, nouns, adjectives, adverbs and things, you know, useful bits of English vocabulary, and put them in a list. And then I've kind of gone into quite a lot of detail, explaining, clarifying, demonstrating, giving examples of all that language to help you understand it, remember it, and use it again later. Okay, so the full premium experience with language from the Walk and Talk Paris episode in premium episode 60 parts 1 and 2. Check them out now. Now, if you are not a premium subscriber, then you could always, sign up. I understand that some people can't because of payment restrictions and things. But if you're still thinking about it, here's an idea of what you get when you sign up for LEP Premium. So what happens is you get an updated podcast feed, which includes all the premium episodes and also the automatic adverts on normal episodes get removed. Okay, so the way it works is you go to teacherluke.co.uk/premium on your phone, right? teacherluke.co.uk/premium. Choose the $4 option, which gives you all the premium episodes plus ad-free content. And then you follow the steps, right? You sign up with Acast and you enter your payment details and stuff. You can cancel anytime you want. It's really just a in-out kind of thing. There are no strings attached. You can cancel whenever you want. And then when you've signed into your Acast account, after you've set up your premium account, you should just be able to see a button that says listen in podcast app. Just tap that and you'll get a number of options in your phone for different podcast apps. Choose the one that you've already got on your phone. For example, for me, as I've said before, Pocket Casts is the app I choose. So I would choose Pocket Casts, and that will then open up Luke's English Podcast Premium. Your premium episode feed will open up in the podcast app you've chosen, in my case, Pocket Casts. Subscribe to that, and there you go. There's your new subscription to Luke's English Podcast Plus or Luke's English Podcast Premium. You get all the free episodes with no automatic ads, but also in the list you'll see all of the premium episodes too. All right. So there are over 200 episodes now, 200 premium episodes. In 99% of them, I teach vocab, grammar, or pronunciation, or all three. There are also quite a lot of story episodes with vocab explanations, grammar practice, and pronunciation practice. There are a couple of rambling episodes. There's a 30-minute recording of a stand-up comedy show I did at the Comedy Store in London, which you can access. That's P26. You get PDFs for nearly every single premium episode, plus video versions for almost all of the ones I've done in the past few years. In the show notes for each premium episode in your app, all those premium episodes are marked with a P, P1, P2, P60 now. You'll find links for PDFs and video versions. You get new premium episodes every month, plus the entire back catalogue of all the premium episodes ever. Okay? That's what you get if you are a premium subscriber. Another question that sometimes my listeners ask me is this: Luke, I would love to see you perform stand-up comedy on stage. Do you have any shows coming up? Yes, I do. I have several shows, including one special show where I'm performing a longer set. I'll be performing for 30 minutes at one of these shows. So if you can come, then come, all right? So here are some of my stand-up comedy dates coming up soon. So I just have 2 upcoming shows to tell you about at the moment. They're both happening in Paris, and if you want to see me do stand-up comedy, these would be good shows to come to if you can. And so here are the 2 shows. The first one is called Paul Taylor and Friends. So this is a show hosted by Paul Taylor. And it's an English show. I think he's going to be joined by, I think he's invited 3 or 4 other guests, and I'm one of those guests. I'll be doing about 15 minutes of stand-up. Also on the show, you'll see Paul Taylor and other comedians performing in English. Paul is the host. He comes up, he does 10 minutes or something, probably 10 minutes of crowd work. This is at the Apollo Theatre in République, a room that holds, I think it's about 400 people, and it's normally sold out. So if you want to come to this one, then act fast and book your tickets now. I'll give you the link in a moment. So Paul opens the show, normally does about 10 minutes, then he'll introduce the first act, who will do about 15 minutes. Then Paul comes back on, does a little bit more, introduces the next person, another 15 minutes, and so on. 4 people, each doing 10 or 15 minutes, and I'll be one of those people, okay? So I'll be doing 15 minutes at the show. I think it's 15. It's always a good show. Paul always gathers a really good audience. So it's always a good show, and the quality of performers is high. These are professional comedians. It's 100% in English. The date is Tuesday the 25th of June at 8 p.m. at the Apollo Theatre in République. Did you like my pronunciation? Excuse me. In République. Probably still not very good, but it doesn't matter. You could just check the Apollo Theatre website or go to paultaylorcomedy.com. And then tickets, I think. Otherwise, just follow the link that you'll see on the PDF. Okay. And then the other show that I'm doing is called Same Difference. And that's happening on the 19th of July. So, Same Difference. We've decided to call it Same Difference. We were looking for a name for the show. We ended up with Same Difference. So this is a special 2-man show that I'm doing. This is a special 2-man show, and I'm doing a full 30-minute set. So I'm doing this with my friend Charles, who is going to be a guest on this podcast in the next few weeks. I'm going to do 30 minutes. He'll do 30 minutes. Okay? We called it Same Difference because basically Charles and I, we're kind of quite similar. We're not the same. Like, I speak British English. I speak English with a British accent. He speaks English with an American accent. We're both actually born in the UK, although Charles is kind of technically French and other things, but we're different, but we're kind of the same. Anyway, Charles is very funny. He tells some really good stories about like having children and living in China and stuff like that. And I'll be doing my stuff. So come and see me do a longer performance. Stay and have a drink afterwards. You could say hi. And I might do a live podcast recording after the show in the room on the stage, but this is not confirmed yet. I'm hoping to do that, but it depends on the arrangement with the venue. But fingers crossed, I should be able to do a live podcast recording. But again, it's not confirmed. But that could be cool. Stand-up show, come for the stand-up show, have a little drink, back into the room to do a live podcast recording. We'll see if that happens, but that's what I would like to do. Friday, the 19th of July at 8:30 p.m. The place is called Au Soleil de la Butte. This is a kind of restaurant bar place with a room downstairs. It's in Montmartre, which is a very picturesque part of Paris, up on the hill next to the Basilique de Sacré-Cœur, right? A very picturesque spot right next to the steps, and everything's really nice. The address is 30 Rue Muller in the 18th arrondissement of Paris. So this room it's a smaller room than the Apollo, maybe 60 people or something. I think we're hoping to fill the room. I mean, we don't have the sort of marketing clout that Paul Taylor does with his production company and the Apollo Theatre and all that stuff. But I think that we should be able to fill this room. Hoping to anyway, but it depends on you, you know. I hope that some of my Lepsters will come and support the show. Charles and I are organising this one ourselves. We're taking over the French Fried Comedy Night. That's what normally happens in that room on Fridays, but we've taken it over. It's going to be the Luke and Charles show, basically. Normally they have about 5 or 6 comics on the show, but for this one it's just us. Free entry, so it's free to get in. We encourage you to buy a drink on the way in. But this is the one I recommend. This is one I hope you come to. So if you're in Paris, come to the show, have laughs, have a drink, say hi to me if you like. Let me and my friend Charles entertain you for an hour. And I'll remind you about this show again on the podcast over the next few weeks. If you want to reserve a spot, if you want to reserve a seat, here is a link on Eventbrite. You'll find the link on the PDF. Okay. Otherwise, search for the French Fried Comedy Night Fridays. Okay, Fridays. French Fried Comedy Night Fridays, 19th of July. The show is not actually listed yet as I record this, but it should be listed on Eventbrite, eventbrite.com. It should be listed there soon, and you should be able to book yourself a seat. Okay. Another question is this. Luke, can you record your stand-up shows for those of us who can't come? Because, of course, something like 99.9% of you, right, can't actually come because you live in different places. So you might be asking, Luke, can you just record your stand-up shows? Well, I'm afraid not. Sorry to give the negative response there, but the thing is, I don't really want to publish all my stand-up comedy material online just yet. The reason is that I want to protect my material. I've talked about this before, but for comedians, their stand-up material is quite important. We work on it, we kind of hone it, and we use it in front of live audiences. But as soon as it gets published online, the chances it's kind of gone then, in a way. You know, it's out there. And if everyone sees it online, then it won't be a surprise when they see me live. And doing stand-up the element of surprise is quite important. I mean, I say that, but anyone who's seen me do stand-up comedy a few times has probably noticed that I've been doing a lot of the same material for quite a long time. I've been working on new stuff. But in any case, I've got this vague idea that one day I'd like to do a good recording of myself doing like a 1-hour show or something like that, and then actually properly release that for my audience. There's that 30-minute show I did, which is available in the premium subscription, but that was like in 2018. I think I've changed. I think I've improved a little bit since then. But anyway, as I said, I'm hoping one day to record it properly and publish it. I'm not ready to do it yet. Yes, so it's about 30 minutes of stand-up. That's the 2018 thing, which is in the premium subscription, P26. That's a show I did at the Comedy Store in London. There's a video version of that too. I think I've improved since then, but sign up to LEP Premium if you want to see it. But otherwise, in terms of other shows, videoing shows I'm doing these days and publishing them, I've decided not to do that. You'll just have to try and come and see me live, or wait for the possible moment that one day I get a decent recording of myself doing a full show and I put it up on YouTube or something. Here are some other questions from listeners that people often ask. This one is one of the most frequent questions I get. It's this: Luke, do you offer one-to-one lessons? Do you offer private lessons online, for example? And the answer to that one is, I'm afraid not. Again, I'm afraid the answer is negative this time. No, I don't. Basically, these days I spend my time doing this. I spend my time preparing, recording, editing and publishing episodes of my podcast and my premium episodes as well. And that's how I spend most of my time, and that's how I want to spend most of my time, frankly, these days. I also teach twice a week to group classes at the British Council, but I don't do sort of private one-to-one lessons online or that sort of thing. And that's just a decision I've made in terms of how I spend my time. I spent many, many years teaching one-to-ones and teaching group classes, and that, I spent a lot of time doing that. But these days, this is really what I like to do. I like to make the content for my podcast. And so that means I've decided I don't really have time to do one-to-one lessons, I'm afraid. Very sorry about that if that's what you were hoping to get that from me. Another question is this: Luke, can you add subtitles to episodes on Spotify? I understand that some podcasts on Spotify now have subtitles, and that this also is coming to Apple Podcasts as well. But they're kind of taking time to roll it out for all the podcasts. I think that if you host your show with Spotify, it's probably that is an option. But anyway, I don't host my show with Spotify. The show is available on Spotify, but it's hosted on Acast. That might be one of the reasons why there are no subtitles for my episodes on Spotify. Now, I keep trying to add them. I log into my Spotify for Podcasters account where I've got various settings and statistics and things. I log in there, but where it says transcript, it says unavailable at this time or something similar. So I keep trying, but it says the option isn't available at the moment. So I keep waiting. I think it's available, as I said, for podcasts subscribed or hosted on Spotify, and they're working on it for podcasts hosted elsewhere, I think. Now, you can get subtitles on YouTube, right? YouTube episodes have always got automatic subtitles. They are 95% accurate. The accuracy is better when I'm speaking on my own. So on YouTube, you can just click the little button which should be down in the sort of bottom right-hand corner of your screen to access the automatic subtitles. They're normally not bad when it's me on my own. They struggle when there's a guest or when the recording conditions are not as good as they are when it's just me on my own in my room. So also, there is a transcript option on YouTube. You can open the transcript, just check down. You need to click, I think, more information to reveal the show notes. Under the show notes, I think it says read transcript. This is YouTube. You can do that and you can read along to the transcript, which is basically just the automatic subtitles but presented slightly differently. You can read along and you can click on a certain part in order to hear it again as well. So always check the episode page on my website. This is another thing you could do because you might find notes and transcripts there. These are like, for example, like for this episode, I've kind of prepared a lot of this in advance, and I've prepared a PDF for you, which I'm basically reading from and sort of editing as I record this. So if you just click the link for the episode page, which you'll find in the show notes wherever you're listening to this, it'll take you to the episode page for this episode on my website. Oh my God, this sounds so complicated. It'll take you to click on the episode page in the show notes for the episode, and that will take you to the episode page on my website where you'll find the PDF for all the things that oh God. It's just sometimes it's so bloody exhausting trying to explain all these things. Just click the link in the description. There you go. And you'll find my notes and scripts that I prepared for this in advance. Here are some comments on recent episodes. Let's have a look back at some recent episodes. We're going to look back at the last 5 or 6 episodes, I think. So episode 877 was called How to Learn Vocabulary, a conversation with Claire Whitmill. And this was basically a preview of that Zoom workshop that I did at the end of April, which was all about ways to learn vocabulary correctly or properly. Okay, so some of you were there at the workshop. So I did the workshop. It was really nice. Some of you listening to this, some of my Lepsters were there. Quite a lot of people were in the Zoom meeting. Numbers were limited, I understand, but some of you got in. So it was really nice to have you with me. It was very nice to see those of you who were there. And quite a lot of people made a point of saying some very lovely things about the podcast, which is always extremely encouraging for me. So thank you for that. I appreciate that when people do sort of say encouraging things about the show. Yeah, I need that sort of encouragement. So thank you for that. Now, those of you who didn't or couldn't attend, I'm going to publish it on the podcast soon. This is the plan. Claire has given me the recording of the, like a video recording of the workshop, and I'm planning to publish it at some point. Now, I was wondering whether I should publish the recording of the workshop, right? So should I publish the recording, the original recording of the workshop, or I was wondering if I'll just make a whole new episode using the slides I created, essentially just kind of like recording it again. Now, I'll have to do that for the audio version in any case, because the audio from the workshop wouldn't really work as an audio episode. There are too many sort of visual elements to the whole workshop. So I'll have to re-record the audio anyway and turn it into a sort of audio-friendly episode. So maybe I'll just... maybe I will re-record the video as well at the same time. I don't know. So either you'll get... In any case, you will get that at some point. Either the original workshop recording or some sort of re-recorded version that I'll do. But that's going to come into your podcast subscription soon. Episode number 878 was called Learning... No, it wasn't. It was called From Learning to Teaching and Beyond with Elena Mutonono. And Elena was my guest. She is an inspiration and a great help for a lot of teachers trying to make it on their own. Teachers who are trying to do the things that, to an extent, I'm not really doing, like trying to find one-to-one clients, trying to build online courses and stuff like that. So Elena is a great help and inspiration for a lot of teachers who are sort of trying to make their way through this industry. And she's also very inspiring for fellow learners of English because, as you heard in the conversation, English isn't her first language. And plenty of listeners expressed this sentiment, this sentiment that she was inspiring. Lots of listeners expressed this sentiment in comments. Here's a selection of the top comments, the most upvoted ones on YouTube. So this was from Roman, and Roman wrote this. He said, I'm from Ukraine and I found the whole monologue of Elena amazingly touching and inspiring. I almost cry sometimes. I suppose that would be I almost cried sometimes. She made incredible progress, and the way she tells about it, that would be the way she talks about it, is so relevant. Thank you both for this podcast. Elena actually replied to Roman's comment. She said, thank you for tuning in, Roman. I'm glad it's inspiring you. Let's move on to episode number 879, which was called Think Fast, Talk Smart, Communication Techniques for Spontaneous Speaking with Matt Abrahams. So this was a wonderful conversation, which was absolutely full of great advice from Matt. Matt was a great guest. I was very lucky to have him on the show. I really enjoyed talking to Matt, and he just made a great contribution. He was just full of really good advice, like everything he said. Straight to the point, really useful, really helpful, and a very pleasant person to meet. Here are some top comments. Alice in Wonderland 631 said this. This is one of the most useful channels for learning English. That's nice to know. At Chris Chris Gue wrote this. When one of the best communicators I've ever met tells us that he blushes when he speaks, it makes me feel like we're all the same and a little more confident in myself and my way of conveying information in the language I'm learning. Thank you for getting down to our level. This is really motivating. So if you remember in that episode, for some reason, I started blushing during the conversation, which is when your face goes red. And, you know, I talked enough about it. I don't need to go into the details about it again. But, I mean, it was a little bit embarrassing. It's more just annoying, really, as I said. But anyway, I got lots of comments from people talking about the blushing and talking about how they appreciated the fact that I'd talked about it because they have the same experience. So I was happy to talk about blushing. It's annoying, but it's something that happens to everyone. It's nice to know that loads of other people have the same experience, and generally people find it quite endearing, you know. So that's nice. Episode 880 was called Is Paris Ready for the Olympic Games 2024? Article plus vocabulary. Here's some top comments. Chantal Pat 2514 wrote this: as French living in the south of France, or as I would say, as a French person living in the south of France, I discovered recently your podcasts, or I recently discovered your podcasts, let's say. I recently discovered your podcasts and I find them amazing. Especially the short stories, but all are so interesting, clearly explained. Many thanks for this enormous work for us. Well, you're welcome, of course. It's very nice to get comments from French listeners, of course, because I live in France, so merci beaucoup for that. I can't pronounce beaucoup. I can't. It's the oo sound. Anyway, Shibab Ahmad 9861 wrote this: thank you, Luke, for your efforts and explaining bit by bit and word by word. So yeah, if you listen to the end of that episode, the Olympics one, then you heard a lot of vocabulary explanations. I went through a big list of vocab from the article that I'd read from and explained and clarified lots of vocab. A bit of a taste of LEP Premium. Now, it would be a good idea, I think, to recap a lot of that in a premium episode. So maybe I'll do that. I might take all that vocab and do a premium episode for you, because that's a really good, I think, important part of the process. Recycling language that you've encountered, coming back to it, reminding yourself of it, and, you know, getting some more detailed explanations and further examples of that language. So I might do that, but at least I recommend that you go back. So I recommend going back through the word list to refresh your memory. You can find it on the episode page for episode 880 in the archive. So just go to my episode archive, which is where you can find the full list of all the website pages for all my episodes, which is where you can find any notes, transcripts or other details, and other things like video playlists that I might share with you. So teacherluke.co.uk/episodes, and then find episode 880, and there you'll find the big vocab list with extracts from the article that I read about the Olympics in Paris. Episode number 881 was called The First Non-Native Speaker to Read the UK TV News with Barbara Serra. So this was my conversation with Italian-born broadcast journalist Barbara Serra, who is a newsreader, and she's read the news on a variety of sort of well-known news channels, including Sky News these days, also on the BBC, Al Jazeera, and a few other networks. She worked for CNN for a while as well. And so Barbara, yeah, it was a great guest. It was great to talk to Barbara. She was very down to earth, very professional, very honest. She tried her best to be as insightful and clear about her experiences relating to using English in her work, and especially about considerations around accents. Right, now let's talk about accents for a little bit, and I want to try to make certain conclusions, more clear conclusions, from what Barbara said in that episode. So here's a response to Barbara Serra's episode. This was from the website page. Mahboube. I'm not sure if I've pronounced that wrong. But anyway, this listener commented like this. This is after Barbara and I had discussed the subject of accents and sort of some of the intricacies and issues, slightly, what's the word for it? Maybe slightly contradictory seeming advice on the subject of whether you should try to get a British accent, the value of having a British accent, the challenge of having a British accent, and all of those things, right? So the comment is this: finally, does learning a specific accent matter or not? So perhaps I didn't make this clear enough. So to add context, all right, listeners, Barbara, if you remember, is an Italian-born journalist who describes herself as a non-native speaker who has English as her dominant language, right? The language she uses the most these days. She learned English from the age of about 9 when she moved to Denmark and went to an international school. And these days, English is the language she uses the most and probably feels most comfortable in. She speaks Italian as well. So she probably feels most comfortable in English these days, but people can still tell that she's not British, even though she's lived there probably since she was a student, really. So, you know, a few years now. So Barbara told several stories in which she talked about how her foreign-sounding, even slightly foreign-sounding accent caused some problems for her when working as a TV newsreader. She said that she was actually taken off air, meaning like the manager, the director, the producer of the news program actually took her off the program because people complained that her accent was foreign-sounding, which sounds a bit kind of racist, doesn't it, really? People phoning into the BBC, people writing in to complain, I don't want my news presented by a foreigner. Barbara was actually kind of quite understanding about it. She talked about, you know, the news is a different thing. You apparently, if you're listening to the news, you want it to be read in your own accent. Anyway, she talked about this, and she talked about how a British RP accent still carries a lot of clout in the world of broadcast journalism. And so she didn't just mean in terms of when you're talking to British audiences, you probably should sound like a British person. She meant that in the world of journalism, you know, where you've got channels like CNN or Al Jazeera or France 24, where journalists are speaking English in the international arena, and you've got that kind of standard American accent, which is probably the most common English accent out in the world globally, right? So American English is probably more prevalent, but I think Barbara was talking about this, that even though British English or a certain received pronunciation standard BBC English accent, although that's not the most common one, it still carries with it a certain level of, I don't know what the word is, a certain level of clout, a certain kind of, it has a certain kind of, it carries some baggage with it. People seem to respect it. They think it sounds trustworthy, and it has a certain high status. The point is that she thinks, in her experience, a certain British accent does have a certain status, right? It stands as a kind of model for clear, respectable and impressive sounding speech. But she also said that learners of English shouldn't worry too much about sounding British, or shouldn't try too hard to get the RP accent, because it's actually nearly impossible to gain a British accent with no trace or imprint from your first language. And you should just be yourself and own it. Meaning, accept the fact that you're going to have a bit of an accent in English. But there is absolutely, and then she said this, there is absolutely no room for compromise when it comes to clarity, and this is the most important thing. So I can understand the person who commented on the episode saying, well, in the end though, what should we do? Should we be trying to get a certain accent or not? does accent even matter then, in the light of what was said by Barbara? Now, I can understand that there was a bit of a mixed message in there, possibly. Should you strive to learn a particular accent or not? Now, first of all, I think it's important to make a distinction between a clear accent and a British accent. And by British accent, in this instance, we're talking about a standard British BBC accent, modern RP, more or less like the way I speak, okay? Although my accent every now and then drifts into the Midlands, sometimes it might drift into a sort of slightly more colloquial London accent sometimes, but most of the time I speak sort of that modern RP, okay? So, a distinction between a clear accent, or speaking clearly, and speaking with this accent, with this British accent. So, this British accent means speaking in a way that shows that you're British. So you use all the sounds, inflections, stress, intonation, etc. that are completely typical for this way of speaking, right? That's what that means. It's a kind of accent which locates you in a certain region. But speaking with clarity might mean that your accent can be placed somewhere. Often this just means outside of the UK, or foreign but we're not sure exactly. Is this clear? So, speaking with clarity. Now, you might mean that your accent sounds a bit foreign, right? Meaning that you sound like you're from outside the UK. You're foreign. We're not sure exactly where you're from. You're from this particular place, but we can understand you perfectly. For example, okay, I think you're French, but we can understand you perfectly. So that's clarity. It's not necessarily. It doesn't matter if it reveals a location. The point is that everyone can understand exactly what you say. Do you understand? Do you see what I mean? Just because people know where you're from doesn't mean that they therefore find you difficult to understand. I think this is a really important distinction to make. I expect a lot of people expect that a British accent is by definition the correct accent, right? But really, first and foremost, an accent should be considered correct if it is clear, if people understand you perfectly when you speak. Now, there might be the Venn diagram where you've got a British RP accent and then you've got clear English, and those things do overlap quite a lot because people do tend to say that this kind of British accent is what they understand, but not necessarily. You can speak with an accent that's not British and still be completely understandable, okay? And being understandable or being clear is the priority, actually, although it does depend on the context. So I'm going to just add a side note here now. While we're on the subject, I'm going to add a side note about listening skills here. Now, I'm afraid that you still have to develop your listening skills to be able to understand people who don't speak clearly. And the definition of what is clear can change depending on the situation. Oh dear, this is getting a bit complicated. So I wanted to emphasize the fact that, so you've got speaking skills, which is all about trying to develop clarity in your speech. But then there's listening skills, and that means actually being open to all the different varieties and trying to basically not expecting everyone to be clear. So it's a kind of a dichotomy, a sort of double-sided thing. On one side, you've got to try to aim for clarity as much as possible. But then in your listening, you can't necessarily just reject people who don't speak clearly, in your opinion. You can't just put all the blame on them, my point is. Right? So, okay, so I mean, learners of English who are familiar with BBC English or standard American pronunciation might hear someone from Glasgow and conclude that their English is impossible to understand. But clearly this isn't true, because people in Glasgow understand each other just fine, and so do plenty of other people, of course. My point here is, yes, you should strive for clear speech as much as you can, but also strive for good listening skills, and don't just expect everyone to speak to you in a certain way and just dismiss them if they don't. English is a very diverse language, and you should be willing and prepared to understand all the varieties. Being a great speaker means being clear. Being a great listener means being able to understand all the different kinds of speech. And these are two different skills. And I just have noticed learners encountering an accent that they're not familiar with and essentially saying it's their fault. Okay, but I don't think that's really fair. I think that it's just, I'm afraid that your listening skills have to incorporate a familiarity with the different varieties of English. And if you don't understand someone because they're speaking with a slightly colloquial style, then that means you've still got some work to do. Okay, it's good to maybe focus on a certain type of English that you find really clear, but also you do have to venture out of your comfort zone and be open-minded in order to try to become familiar with, sort of colloquial London accents or people from different parts of the country, different parts of the world. Okay? All right. There you go. That's the end of my little lecture there. Anyway, what about this question from Mahboueb? Oh, how do I say your name? I'm so sorry. I can't say it. Mahboueb. No. Mahbouber. I've probably got that completely wrong, like I do with all the names. Anyway, what about this question then? Does learning a specific accent matter or not? And here's the reply that I actually wrote on the website under that comment. I wrote this. I said, I think it depends on the context in which you will be using English. According to what Barbara said, if you're reading the national news to a UK audience, then yes, it does matter. You should sound like a British person. Otherwise, in most other cases, when you're speaking English in an international context or when it's fine to sound a bit foreign, then it's okay to have a bit of an accent. What's vital in all situations is clarity. It's possible to have a foreign accent and still be very clear. Clarity is the main thing, and the ability to make connections with the people you're talking to. So when we talk about clarity, what does that actually mean? A good example of this is when Barbara talked about TH sounds and was it L sounds? Certain sounds she identified as being the ones that caused her English to sound a bit flabby, meaning not precise enough. Right? So, and she focused on those things, which allowed her to be more clear. Right? Now, you could still tell that she's not British, but she cleared up the things that made it incomprehensible. It's the same thing, really, with grammatical accuracy as well, right? And this is reflected in Cambridge exam criteria, assessment criteria. So you'll get marked down more harshly in a written exam for Cambridge if your grammatical mistakes lead to a lack of clarity in your writing. But if you make little grammatical slips which don't actually affect the meaning, then that's clearly far less serious, isn't it? Right? It might not give such a good impression, but the most important thing is that people understand exactly what you're trying to say. Okay. Clarity is the main thing, and the ability to make connections with the people you're talking to. Hello, this is Luke from the future, and I'm just interrupting here because I wanted to add something. So I'm just recording this bit a couple of days after I recorded most of this episode. So it's 2 days later. Still raining, by the way. Anyway, so I'm interrupting here just because since I recorded this episode, Mahbouba, and I think that's how it's pronounced, she replied to my reply and asked a good question, which I'm sure a lot of people listening have thought about. So let's just continue the conversation a little bit here. So even though this will extend the length of this episode even further, I just wanted to add a few more comments and perhaps kind of draw a line under this issue. Let me read out Mahbouba's comment and I'll add my thoughts as I go. I think this is important. I think that this question is something that all learners of English have to consider at some point. Basically, the question of accent and identity. Which accent? How should you improve your accent? What should your target be? Is it possible to sound exactly like a native speaker? Should you try to sound like a native speaker? If you shouldn't, which is kind of what I've suggested already, I think, which is that maybe that's not your priority, but clarity is your priority. If you want to achieve clarity, how do you do that? What does that actually sound like? And things like that. So it's kind of a never-ending conversation because it's so nuanced and a bit complicated to kind of weave our path through this issue. But let's try to continue a little bit, and I'll add a few other comments. So let me read out Mabube's comment, and I'll add my thoughts as I go. So this is what she wrote 9 hours ago. So thank you very, very much for your clear response, but there's something I've been struggling with. I'm not sure if it was episode 762, Meditation and Learning English, where you had a conversation with Elena Mutonono talking about your ability to speak French like a native speaker, and that the fear of being judged might stop you from speaking as well as you're able to. Actually, I'm not sure I get the point, because I'm not sure if you've told that, if you said that in terms of accent or not, and if I didn't, sorry for that. All right, so let me just clarify that bit. So she's referring to something I must have said in that episode with Anthony about meditation, and the point of the meditation episode, or one of the points there, was that essentially meditation can help you to kind of clear your mind of anxieties, stresses, distractions, and other things that can actually affect your ability to learn English. And by kind of clearing your mind of those things and perhaps getting more comfortable with yourself, then you set yourself up to be able to learn English more effectively, because, you know, these sorts of worries, concerns, fears can block you and stop you from being as good as you can. That's really the point I was trying to make there. I must have given an example of my attitude towards my French, which is often quite negative, and is something I need to work on, you know, and obviously practicing and working on my French is the obvious way to do that. But other things I could do is just to perhaps be mindful of my attitude, and meditation can just help to put you in the right sort of mental space to clear away a lot of those negative feelings. So that's kind of the point I was making there, which is it's not specifically related to the accent issue, but it's kind of, I guess, related somehow. But anyway, let's continue the comment, and this is where it specifically gets to the point. Mabube said, I mean, according to what you've said, is there anything wrong with a learner who wants to omit the effects of his or her first language and try to speak with an accent he or she prefers to? Right, this is a really good question. Is there anything wrong with a learner of English who wants to remove all trace of their first language when in their pronunciation of English? Is there anything wrong with that? And of course there isn't. Of course there's nothing wrong with that. If that's really what you want to do, then by all means feel free to try to do that. I wouldn't want to suggest that no one should try to remove every trace of their first language. You know, I think that, of course, if that's what you want to set as your aim, then please go for it. Reach for the stars, okay? And go for it. You can do anything you want, of course. But going back to the conclusions from the conversation with Barbara, from her experience, and she's, you know, very experienced in this, and also in my experience as well, to an extent, and I've noticed this, and I also have heard this point being made by other people, it is extremely difficult to get to the point where there is no trace of a quote-unquote foreign accent in your English. That even if you get to a really, really excellent level, right, like, for example, Barbara, where she's communicating sort of better than a lot of native speakers do, she's using sort of really refined communication skills in order to do live news reading, to present news programs, to do interviews, journalism, right? Broadcast journalism is extremely, it's extremely difficult form of communication, right? And Barbara's operating at that extremely high level, but there's still traces of some sort of accent there. So the point is, it's very difficult to remove all those traces. For example, when Barbara speaks to people, they say, oh, it's really nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah. Oh, by the way, where is your accent from? So they can tell that she's not from the UK. So the point is, of course, you can try to do anything you want, and I encourage you to be ambitious and to reach for the stars and all that stuff. There's nothing wrong with trying to remove all traces of an accent from your English. Absolutely fine. The point is, it's rare that people get to that stage. It's rare to get there. But, doesn't mean you shouldn't stop trying to do it. And in fact, the act of trying to do it can push your English to a really good level, Another point is like, why would you want to do that? I mean, it's up to you, of course. You can, you're free to do whatever you want. But why would you want to remove all trace of why would you want to remove all trace of a foreign sound in your accent, right? Now, maybe it's for a very particular purpose. For example, you're reading the news on the BBC in London, and the people watching the news want to hear it read in their accent. There's maybe that reason. Another reason could be you're an actor preparing for a certain role. For example, you're going to portray a British person in a film or TV show, and so you want to be able to sound like that character would sound. And this would be true of any native speaker as well who has a different accent. For example, American actors have to do this all the time, right? Although it's a little bit different with actors because they have a script and all they have to do is learn those specific lines in a different accent. They don't have to actually become a different person and live their life with that accent. They just learn certain lines, and they work with accent coaches to learn those specific lines. But anyway, there's that. Another reason might be that you're a spy, and I'm not suggesting that, of course. This is more of a sort of funny response, that you're a spy and you would want to be completely undetectable, you just want to blend in completely and have no one realize that you're from somewhere else, or that you're someone that you're not, or a fourth reason is just that you just really want to, and that's just what you want to do. So of course, nothing wrong with doing that at all. It's just difficult, that's all. But still, it's fine to try. Of course, I wouldn't want to limit your ambitions. And the comment continues: would the individual be judged by native speakers? This is another good point, right? So if you're trying to sound like a British person, or an American person or whatever, and you're mixing with native speakers from that place, and they notice you trying to sound like a British person, would the individual be judged by native speakers? I don't think so. In fact, I think probably native speakers would find it quite endearing, meaning that they would find it nice. They'd find it lovely. When someone makes an obvious effort to learn your language, it's very flattering, and people generally love it, right? In fact, I think people really respect it. Now, the only issue here is that slightly sensitive personal identity issue relating to authenticity, right? So obviously it's important to push yourself and try your best, and people will appreciate your effort in speaking their language as well as possible. But at the same time, there's this undefinable sense that people know when someone is not really being themselves. So it's a very difficult line that you have to walk, isn't it? Between trying to sound like a native, or at least trying to sound, trying to improve your English, but also still maintaining some level of authenticity and not being fake or something like that. I think it's unlikely. It's unlikely to be a big problem, but there's that slight sense that if you're, I've met some people who have tried to sound like a Cockney or something. They've decided, I'm going to sound like a kind of like. They've got a slightly mistaken idea of what an authentic English accent is, and they are doing that, and it ends up sounding a bit like a kind of like a caricatured impression of it, which was a bit odd. And you kind of feel like, just be yourself. So I think on the whole, native speakers will not judge you negatively for trying to sound like them. I think people will just see it as an obvious effort to learn their language, and people will like that. Best comment continues, does it sound ridiculous to native speakers? No, it doesn't. Not normally. Why would... So the comment continues then, why would we try something like the shadowing technique? So the point there is that if sounding like a native speaker isn't really necessary, and instead clarity is what you should be looking for, right? Why then should we bother at all? Why should we bother to, make these efforts to, let's say, copy or replicate the way that native speakers talk? Why should we do listen and repeat exercises? Why should we do shadowing? Right? Shadowing, that just means sort of repeating what someone says while they say it. So I think that shadowing is still a really good idea. Trying to copy or replicate native speaker English, or at least English that's really clear, is still a really good idea, because it might be, if you're looking for clarity, you'd need to find an example of English which you think is really clear. Okay, a really clear example of a form of English that you are aspiring to. Now, even if this means you will never be able to sound exactly like a native speaker, there are still lots of important features of speech that you need to copy and replicate. You see? So that means things like getting the word stress of words right, because if you're getting the word stress wrong, then people can misunderstand what you're saying because you're stressing the wrong syllable of the word. Sentence stress, learning the rhythm of different sentences, learning, how different parts of a sentence, different syllables in a sentence get emphasized. This is also a really important feature of clarity, and a good way of practicing that is to listen to someone speaking in a clear way. Listen to the way that they emphasize different parts of a sentence. Listen to the way they pause. Listen to the way they go up and the way they go down, right? And those are all important things to bear in mind, because those are important things that lead to clarity, okay? You see what I mean? So it's still important to shadow. You just need to find the right model, a model that you think is clear, a good example of clear English, and you can try to replicate it. That's all in order to achieve this thing called clarity, right? It's not necessarily because you need to make people believe that you are a British person. That's not really necessary. That's an identity issue that's kind of up to you, but Barbara seems to think that that's perhaps not necessary unless you've got a very specific reason for doing it, like you're doing a certain job, or you're a spy, or you're an actor, or whatever the reason is. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So let me just try and finish this off, and then we'll continue. You need a model, right? Don't you? You need a model of a kind of English that you can work towards. And so what is that model? And probably it's going to be some sort of standard version of English, probably like a standard British English, let's say, one that is reasonably universal. Now, every single accent has baggage. Every single accent brings with it its own identity issues. For example, if you try to speak with received pronunciation, for example, received pronunciation does suggest a certain identity. It suggests a sort of probably someone from the southeast of England. It's probably sort of quite London-centric. It sounds like someone it sounds quite middle class or upper class. Upper class is a bit different. Upper class accents are quite specific as well, but you know what I mean. So every accent has got some kind of baggage to it. Every accent is associated with certain things, but probably received pronunciation, or a modern received pronunciation, is probably going to be the most neutral one, to be honest. And that's not to say that other regional accents have less value than RP. And in fact, RP, or modern received pronunciation, is not the most common form, but it's probably still considered to be a sort of neutral form. It's not completely neutral, but it's probably the one that is going to be the clearest for everyone, right? And also, not only that, it's a practical issue too, that all the materials, like the dictionaries and a lot of the pronunciation guides and a lot of materials for pronunciation, are based on this accent, this modern received pronunciation. So if you look in the dictionary, for a dictionary for learners of English, the phonemic transcriptions will be in this accent. And so it's just easier to go for to sort of use that as your basis for clarity, your model of clarity. Okay, and so, yeah, shadowing, doing all the techniques for working on your pronunciation are all a great idea in order to aim for clarity. And whether you try to completely remove every trace of your first language from your accent is up to you, but it might not really be necessary, and it's extremely difficult to do, to have zero trace. And I think it's perfectly fine to have little traces of your accent in your English, of your origins in your English, as long as everything you're doing is clear to everyone. Okay, I hope that's clear. It's quite a difficult thing to explain, and sort of manoeuvring your way through these issues is a bit complex, but hopefully I managed to do a reasonable job of it there. But everyone, feel free to leave your comments in the comments section relating to this issue. Okay, let's now go back to the past and continue this apparently epically long episode. Here we go. Okay, right, let's move on to something a little bit less heavy, and that is episode 882, which was called 47 Funny, in inverted commas, or speech marks, Country Jokes Explained. Right, now I really enjoyed this and was extremely happy with the overwhelmingly positive response the episode got, because basically it was just a nice relief to just have a bit of stupid fun with some quite terrible jokes. Right, it was great to add a bit of levity and just to have some fun with some pretty awful and cringe-worthy jokes, although some of them were actually really funny, I think. Now, I'll do some more joke explaining at some point. I've been collecting more jokes, so there'll be more joke explaining on the podcast. I've been doing that for years and years, of course. I don't know how many episodes I've done in which I explain jokes, but there are loads. And you should explore the episode archive, teacherluke.co.uk/episodes. Natalia De Paula, 6121, wrote this. She said, "You explaining each one of them is even funnier." Good. I'm really glad that you said that, because obviously I am very motivated to do episodes about jokes because I just love jokes, obviously. But then it sounds like a good idea on paper. I'll tell some jokes and I'll explain the vocab. It'll be funny and we'll learn English from it. Sounds like a good idea on paper, but in practice, telling jokes to learners of English and then explaining the jokes can get pretty laborious and is often the opposite of funny. But I've had quite a lot of practice at it because I've been trying to do it for years, and I've sort of learnt, I don't know, I just sort of learned how to do it really, I suppose. But I'm really glad that the act of explaining the jokes is even funnier. Good. That's great. That's a good sign. My personal favourites from the episode. Here are my jokes that here are my favourite jokes. These are the jokes that were my favourites. Right. Let's just go through them again. See if you can remember these. There's just 7 jokes. I'll just fly through them. I'm not going to explain the jokes now. You'll have to go back to episode, what was it, 882 to get all the explanations. But these were my favourites. and just to help you remember them. See if you can remember these jokes later. That could be a good little challenge for your English. Try and remember the jokes and say them again. And when you tell jokes, you do have to kind of get them exactly right. You've got to get the timing right. You've got to remember the wording. Try not to fumble or fluff the line, the punchline, right? Okay, so what's the best thing about Switzerland? I don't know, but the flag is a big plus. Next one is Amsterdam is a lot like the Tour de France. Just a lot of people on drugs riding bikes. It could go the other way round, right? I was actually thinking of taking this joke because I don't think no one's authored this. It's not like this is from someone's Netflix special. This is just one of those jokes that's out there. But I think it could be remixed and it could be turned the other way because obviously I live in France. I talk about French things. So I think when the Tour de France happens, I could use this joke. I think that's acceptable. But you could do it the other way around. You could say, so I see the Tour de France is happening. Tour de France it's a lot like Amsterdam, isn't it, really? Just a lot of people on drugs riding bikes. It's just like Amsterdam. I don't know, maybe. The only way to find out if that would be good is to try it on stage. It might need to be finessed. It might need to be incorporated into a story of some kind. I don't know. Anyway, number 3. Which country's capital is growing the fastest? Ireland, because every day it's Dublin. Right? Another one of my favourites. Why do bagpipe players walk while they play? To get away from the noise. Why is it hard to make friends in Antarctica? Because you can't break the ice. I've heard that Argentina is starting to get a little colder. In fact, it's bordering on chilly. And did you hear McDonald's will stop serving fries in Switzerland? Yeah, because the Swiss don't take sides. And there was that, by the way, there was that one about Greece, which I didn't understand, but I get it now. I think I got it at the time as well, but I was more sort of, what's the word for it? More just slightly gobsmacked at what a terrible joke it is. So, by the way, I get the one about Greece, but I just think it's a terrible joke. So that joke again. What are Greek houses made of? The answer, Greeks and concrete. Now, as a few people pointed out in the comment section, Greeks is supposed to be like bricks, but the words don't rhyme. I mean, they don't. Greeks and bricks don't rhyme. E in Greeks, I in bricks. They've got to rhyme, and they do have to sound similar. I mean, you don't say Gricks, do you? No one says Gricks. It's Greeks. No one says Breeks, do they? It's bricks. Are there any accents when Greeks sounds like Gricks? Maybe in an American accent, or a certain type of American accent, but I don't think so. So Greeks is supposed to be like bricks, but the words don't rhyme. And anyway, why would you make houses out of people? Doesn't make any sense. Like, for me, the best jokes make sense on both levels. This is the whole point of a joke, that it means two things at the same time. But the best ones are when those two meanings actually make sense, some kind of sense. For example, which country's capital is growing the fastest? Ireland, because every day it's Dublin. Now, it's not perfect, but both meanings do make sense. Dublin is expanding by 100% every day, which is why it's growing the fastest. Okay, every day it's Dublin, it's doubling. It's expanding by 100% every day. Now, okay, this is not true. Dublin is not expanding that quickly, but it's kind of feasible. The second thing is Dublin is the capital of Ireland every day. Every day it's Dublin, right? So both sentences do mean something. It's not perfect. It's a bit of a stretch to okay, I suppose that's meaningful, I suppose. I think actually the Argentina-Chile joke is better. Argentina is bordering on Chile, right? Have you heard Argentina's getting colder? In fact, it's bordering on Chile. So the two meanings. One meaning is that Argentina shares a border with Chile. The second meaning is that Argentina is getting colder and is nearly Chile. It's almost Chile. Now, this is not actually true. I don't think Argentina's getting colder. I think probably like everywhere, it's getting warmer, right? But it still makes sense, right? It's getting chilly. It's nearly chilly. It's bordering on chilly. So it's bordering on chilly clearly means two things at the same time. Both those meanings make some sense. I'm now trying to think of a joke that works well on both levels. One of my favourite jokes, I think, is good because it works pretty well on both levels. Why did the scarecrow win the prize? Because he was outstanding in his field. A scarecrow is one of those things that farmers put in their fields to stop the birds from landing and eating all of the crops, right? It's sort of like a person made from a couple of sticks, a hat, some straw, some old clothes. It stands out in the field and the birds think it's a person and they don't land there. It's a scarecrow. Why did the scarecrow win the prize? Because he was outstanding in his field. Okay, so meaning number one, it was he won the prize because he was better than everyone else. He was outstanding, right? He was outstanding in his field. He was better than everyone else in his particular job. In this case, being a scarecrow. He was the best scarecrow. He was outstanding in his field. Meaning number two, he won the prize because he was doing his job. He was standing where? Where was he standing? He was standing out in his field. He was out. What was he doing? Standing in his field. He was out standing in his field. So why did the scarecrow win the prize? Because he was outstanding in his field. He was great at his job. And because he was out standing in his field. Right? The two things mean the same. The two things mean something. So the two meanings kind of both make sense at the same time. That's a good joke. But there's a picture of a scarecrow winning a prize. But what are Greek houses made of? Greeks and concrete? God, it's terrible. Also, we've got the repetition of the word Greeks. The repetition of Greek. You shouldn't really be repeating the same word in the setup and the punchline. It's a disaster. Anyway, well, let's move on. Next episode was episode 883, which was called a last-minute rambling episode. So in this one, I recorded the whole episode, then checked the recording and discovered that my camera wasn't capturing anything. It was a nightmare. Thankfully, the microphone worked, but I didn't have time or the heart, to be honest, to record it. So I blessed the podcasting gods that the audio got recorded and just published that. The audio podcast wasn't affected, but the video version had a completely black screen like the Spinal Tap album cover. Making a reference now to Spinal Tap, that comedy film. I did an episode with my brother about it a couple of years ago, which quite a lot of people didn't listen to, certainly on YouTube anyway. But if you did listen to that, then maybe you'll know what I'm talking about. Spinal Tap are a band, right? And it's a sort of a parody of a rock band. It's like a documentary about this rock band. It's not a real rock band. It's not a real documentary. It's a comedy show. And in this documentary about this ridiculous rock band, they get a new album. And the album cover, because they couldn't decide what to put on the cover, because their first idea was too sexist. They ended up with a completely black cover, just black. A bit like the video from episode 883 a couple of weeks ago, just a black screen. And there's a famous scene from the film where they discuss the album cover. Let's actually look at that. Let's look at that. This is a clip from This Is Spinal Tap. Is this going to get flagged up on YouTube? It might do. And this is the moment where they receive the album cover. Just listen to some of the comments.
Wait a minute.
So what's happening here is that Ian, their manager, is handing out the brand new copies of the album to the members of the band, and they're all looking at the album, and some of them don't like it, and some of them, like Ian, the manager, definitely likes it. He's trying to be positive. I think it looks fantastic. And just listen to some of the comments that they make about this all-black album cover.
What do you think?
Is this the test pressing?
No, this is it. Yes,
This is
that's right.
Smell the Glove by Spinal Tap. When you go to the
Smell
store,
the Glove. That's the jacket cover that's going out across the country
It's the
in every
compromise,
store.
mate.
Yes.
Is it going to say anything here?
It doesn't even say
No,
anything.
it's not going to say
Nothing on the
anything.
So it's
spine.
just going to be like this, all
It's going to be
black.
that simple, beautiful, classic.
It does look like, black leather. You can see
as
yourself
artists.
in both sides.
I wouldn't feel so bad.
It's like a black mirror.
So bad.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I think it looks like death.
David,
It looks
death.
like mourning. I mean, it looks...
Every movie in every cinema is about death. Death sells.
I think he's right. There's something about this that's so black. It's like, how much more black could this be? And the answer is none. None
Is that good?
more black.
I think you're rationalising this whole thing into something that you did on purpose. I think we're stuck with a very stupid and a very dismal looking album. This is depressing. This is something you wear around your arm. You don't put this on your fucking turntable.
David, it's a choice.
I frankly think that this is the turning point. Okay.
you think it's
I think this is. We're on our way now. It's time to.
I agree.
It's time to kick ass.
Yeah, it's time to kick ass. All right, let's just listen to some of those comments again. For example, when I'm with my brother, we're always quoting little lines from this film with each other.
Wait a minute, a little fan.
What do you think?
Is this the test pressing?
Is this the test pressing? Often when an album is made, there's a test pressing. So not the final version, just a kind of test version. And it might have a plain cover. Is this the test pressing?
No, this is it. Yes,
This
that's
is
right.
Smell the Glove by Spinal Tap.
This is Smell the Glove by Spinal Tap. The album's called Smell the Glove. It's a stupid title.
That's
the
Smell the
stores.
Glove. That's the jacket cover that's going out across the country
It's the
in every
compromise,
store.
mate.
Is
Yes.
it going to say anything here?
It doesn't even say
No,
anything.
it's not going to say
Nothing on
anything.
the spine.
It's not going to say anything, so there's not going to be any writing on it, just completely plain black cover.
It's just going to be like this, all
It's going to be
black.
that simple, beautiful, classic.
It does look like, black leather. You can see
It does look like, black leather, okay.
yourself in.
Because as a rock band, they like that, so someone's trying to be positive about it. I think Derek Small says it looks like a Black Mirror, which I think is where the Netflix show Black Mirror got the name from, by the way. Charlie Brooker, who was the creator of the show, the principal writer of the show, I think is a big fan of Spinal Tap, like all of the people of our generation. So there you go. It looks like a Black Mirror, says Derek.
You can see yourself in both sides.
You can see yourself in both sides. It's like a mirror. Yeah?
I wouldn't feel so bad.
It's like a black mirror.
So bad.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I think it looks like death.
David,
it looks
death.
like mourning. I mean, it looks...
It looks like death, says David, but then Ian is trying to convince him that this is actually a good thing, that death sells, because every movie and every cinema is about death. This is Ian attempting to sell the idea.
Every movie in every cinema is about death. Death sells.
I think he's right. There's something about this that's so black. It's like, how much more black could this be? And the answer is none. None
Is that good?
more black.
That's a classic quote from the film. How much more black could this be? And the answer is none more black. Right, that was kind of like what I was going for, you see, with this completely black screen. I just thought, how much more black can this be? And the answer is none more black. It's like a Black Mirror. But I'm not sure everyone agreed. Some people did. Rosalind Lou Painting said, it's great to really listen to you and not get distracted by the visuals. Visuals with an S. Well, that's nice of you to say that. But I have to say, everybody, that this episode on YouTube underperformed, right? Meaning that it didn't get the numbers, the views are definitely lower than a lot of other videos that I've published recently. So it underperformed, meaning it didn't get picked up by the algorithm, and therefore not so many people watched it, probably because of reasons like this. So first of all, fewer people than normal clicked on the thumbnail of the episode. The thumbnail is the little image that goes along with the episode. So when you see all those videos on YouTube, those little images above the titles, those are the thumbnails. And thumbnails are vitally important because this is the first impression, that people get, and a thumbnail can attract your attention. It can compel you to click it. There's good thumbnails, bad thumbnails, in terms of engagement. So fewer people than normal clicked on the thumbnail because it was a bit weird. A black outline of me. It looked like a vague black ghost or something. Maybe I could have done something better, but I don't want to use clickbait, right? There are probably, if that was my main job, if it was just making YouTube thumbnails, then there's an art to that, and there's an art to creating the thumbnails that will just sort of like get into someone's mind, that there's a psychology of it that will cause people to click on it. And a lot of that is about sort of maybe even selling something compelling, like giving the impression that something is much more exciting or interesting than it actually is. For example, let's say it's a clip of Ringo from the Beatles talking about some of the songs in the Beatles, and he gives a slightly negative opinion about a couple of the songs, and the thumbnail is a shot of Ringo, and they've picked a shot of him looking really angry, and then it's across the thumbnail in a certain bright text, it says, Ringo hated these Beatles songs, and there he is, like kind of looking angry. And you think, oh, what's that? I can't. It's sort of it seems to get your attention, and it sort of piques your interest, and there's a certain emotional, a compelling emotional reaction to seeing that, like someone angry, someone's having an argument, someone's expressing a strong emotion. I'll click it. There's psychology behind it all. So I don't want to use clickbait. I just don't like it. So I always want to show in the thumbnail roughly what you're going to get in the episode. For example, it's normally just a picture of me in front of the microphone, with maybe a bit of text on the screen, or some text that gives you a good idea of what's going to be in the episode, right? This time it was a video. The episode was a video without a video. And so I just had a black outline of myself. Anyway, the thumbnail probably affected the click-through rate. That's one of the factors which affects the success of a video. That's the first reason it probably didn't do very well. Second reason is that people probably didn't watch it for very long. Right? They didn't watch it for very long, or didn't click like on the video because there was no video, just a blank screen, just a black screen. I expect quite a lot of people jumped ship, like they just left and stopped watching, which affected the watch time. That's another factor which affects performance and also the algorithm. So these two factors meant that the video didn't get promoted in things like suggested videos, etc. As a result, the episode got fewer views because it was being suggested to fewer people. The audio podcast did well, as the audio episodes usually do, because of the nature of the platform, the audio platforms, those audio podcast apps. If you're subscribed to the audio podcast, you receive each new episode in your app, and you probably listen to it with less of a judgment or expectation. You just listen to the next episode as it comes along, and you're more likely to continue listening and to finish the episode. YouTube, on the other hand, is always suggesting new videos for you, and they often have very intriguing or compelling thumbnails, which are just there on the side of the screen. And so the likelihood is that you'll click away more easily. Don't do it! Don't do it! I just showed them to you, and you're like, click, I will click them. No, don't do it. But the people who stayed and listened to the episode on YouTube and in audio land, I suppose, although I get less feedback on audio episodes, those people seemed to like it, and a few people understood that with this show, it's the listening part which is the most important part, and listening without video is actually great for a lot of reasons, which I gave in the episode. So consider downloading Pocket Casts on your phone and then subscribing to Luke's English Podcast on there. Then you can listen to all the episodes while you're doing other things, and you don't have to stare at the screen the entire time and be distracted, like things like my face and whether there's hair on it or not, because that's really not that important. It's just distracting. Of course, if you prefer watching on YouTube, that's great as well. I just wanted you to consider the other option, which is the audio podcast, and just to consider the advantages of both different platforms. Okay, Here's a correction from episode 883. In the episode, I talked about doing the bridge in France, which is when there's a public holiday on a Tuesday or Thursday and people take the Monday or Friday off to make an extra long weekend. Then I mentioned times when there's a super extra long weekend when two public holidays arrive right next to each other in the middle of the week. Right? Did you remember that? When I talked about the bridge. So, for example, the public holiday arrives on a Thursday. Everyone takes the Friday off. They do the bridge. They end up with a big weekend, long 4-day weekend. But then there's this time, these moments, when there's a super extra long weekend, when two public holidays arrive right next to each other in the middle of the week. For example, on Wednesday and Thursday, which is what happened earlier this month. Wednesday was a public holiday. Thursday was a public holiday as well. Everyone took the Friday off. We ended up with a 5-day weekend, which is what happened a few weeks ago. Yeah. In fact, my son's creche, that's the daycare centre for kids, took the Monday off as well for a training day. And so it was a 6-day weekend. And in France, people are calling this a viaduct. A like really long, big bridge. So I said that a viaduct was a big Roman bridge which carried water. But of course that is an aqueduct, isn't it? And I hate to get anything wrong on this podcast, which is why I wanted to correct myself. So I just wanted to clarify what a viaduct and aqueduct actually are. Right? So an aqueduct, you could tell with the name aqua, it's a big Roman bridge which carried water over a valley or a riverbed. A viaduct is a similar structure to an aqueduct, but it is, or was in Roman times, I think still is because a lot of them still exist, designed to carry a road or railway, although I don't think railways existed in the Roman era. They didn't get that far, they didn't create railways. These days, yes, you can have railways over a viaduct, but I don't think the Romans were doing it. Anyway, got it? So, there you go. Now, this just in. This is just sort of a random tangent here. So, my friend just sent me this meme on WhatsApp, and I just felt compelled to share it. I have to share it. So, the meme is this. It's a picture of Prince William, and it says, Prince William has been named UK's third sexiest man of 2024. And then Ben Wexler on Twitter, x.com, has written, is sexy one of those words that means something different in British, like lift or chips? and then another comment is rich. Rich, Ben, it means rich. So let me just explain this. So apparently some news headline, I don't know if this is even true, but Prince William has been named UK's third sexiest man of 24. Is this really true? What? Prince William named third sexiest man according to a bizarre list. What list is this that's named him as the third sexiest man? Third? I mean, he's not bad. Like, Prince William's not bad. He's not quite as good looking as he used to be. There was maybe about 5 minutes in the 90s when Prince William was a bit of a heartthrob, right? These days, I mean, he's just generic royal English man, isn't he now? I mean, fair enough, he's kind of lost his hair, which is, it's not the end of the world. A lot of guys maintain their sex appeal with a bald head, that's fine. That's not necessarily a factor. But I don't know, he's got the kind of, I don't know how to describe it. He's got that sort of horsey kind of Windsor royal family sort of, that sort of, I'm just a bit too posh, I don't know. It's that's how I think. Prince William featured on the UK's Sexiest Men Alive 2024 list alongside the likes of Tom Holland, Idris Elba, and Romesh Ranganathan. He's third sexiest. Who is the sexiest? According to a couple of thousand of the site's female users, William is the third sexiest in the UK, just ahead of England manager Gareth Southgate, though trailing to Spider-Man heartthrob Tom Holland. And surprisingly, the poll winner, former Top Gear host Jeremy Clarkson, get out of town. Who are these women voting on this? I don't believe this is true. This has got to be nonsense. Who are these women who are claiming that Jeremy Clarkson is sexier than Idris Elba or Tom Holland, and that Prince William is the third in the list? Anyway, what do you think, listeners? I mean, do you think there's any truth in this? I mean, do you think that William is the third sexiest man in the UK? And if you're wondering who Jeremy Clarkson is, I mean, you'll probably know him. He was from Top Gear and the Grand Tour. He's a sort of just an awful boomer, basically. I mean, I quite like his TV shows, but I mean, really, the sexiest man? Jeremy Clarkson. Oh, God. How could he be the sexiest man in Britain? Sexiest British man? I don't know. Maybe he's got a certain kind of... I mean, if you're attracted to grumpy farmers, if you're attracted to rich right-wing farmers, then maybe he's your cup of tea. I don't know. But I don't know. Him compared to Idris Elba? Or anyone? Who's Aaron Taylor-Johnson? Who might be the next James Bond? I mean, really, everyone. What's the world coming to? I don't know. So anyway, the meme. Prince William's been named UK's third sexiest man of 2024. Ben Wexler, I guess on X.com, said, is sexy one of those words that means something different in British, like lift or chips? So presumably Ben Wexler is from the United States. He's an American. And it's a funny comment, meaning, okay, does sexy mean what we think it means? Maybe in British English, sexy means something different, like the way that chips and lift mean something different in British English. And then someone else's comment, it means rich, Ben. Sexy means rich. They mean he's the third richest man of 2024. Anyway, that made me laugh, so I wanted to share it with you. Moving on to the most recent episode that I did. Episode 884. Did you listen to it, listeners? What did you think of that? Did it make any sense to you? I don't know. For some of you, that would have all just seemed like Greek, which is a Shakespeare quote. Check how sophisticated I am. If you say it's all Greek to me, it just means it's all sort of stuff I don't really understand. Anyway, British Music Madness with James was episode 884. Now, this episode was a bit of a labour of love for me, because I spent so much time working on it, inserting the clips, editing the conversation. There were quite a few little interruptions and things during the conversation, so it took some time for me to edit it all together, to insert the clips, to find the clips, it took a long time, and generally putting the whole thing together, it took ages, but I really enjoyed getting back into the music of Madness and also learning more about this band that James and I have been fans of since we were kids. And it's always nice to chat with James on the show. But again, the video version on YouTube underperformed. In fact, it was even less... it did even worse than the previous one, which didn't even have a video. Also the conversation with James didn't have a video either, but anyway, the video version on YouTube underperformed, probably for the same reasons as the previous one, and because the title and thumbnail didn't quite catch people's attention as much as other episodes. Like the country jokes one, the short story ones, they have catchy titles, catchy thumbnails, and an obvious sense of appeal for the average learner of English. Nevertheless, I really enjoyed doing it, and, for the reasons I just gave. Here's a response to the Madness episode from a listener with a couple of questions. So Anna Samek, 5179, wrote this. Hi Luke, I really enjoyed this episode with your brother James. Your enthusiasm for music is really infectious. I've never heard of the band Madness before, but I was certainly familiar with the songs Our House and One Step Beyond, although before this podcast I wouldn't be able to identify the band. But now, thanks to you and your brother, I know more. So I would actually say I had never heard of the band Madness, because I guess now you have, right? So I'd never heard of the band Madness. I was certainly familiar with the songs, although before this podcast I wouldn't have been able to. You see? I wouldn't be able to identify the songs now, but before the podcast, I wouldn't have been able to identify the band. Right? But now, thanks to you and your brother, I know more. I hope you will continue talking about music in future podcasts. So Anna's written in the future podcasts, but it's actually in future podcasts. We would say in the future, but if it's future podcasts, in future episodes, we drop the. So I hope you'll continue talking about music in future episodes, in future podcasts. Okay. Or in the future, full stop. She continued, I would be really interested in finding out how you learned to play musical instruments and what you think about teaching music to young children and adults. Are you planning, she's written, are you planning of giving? It should be, are you planning to give? Because it's plan to do. Are you planning to give, for example, piano lessons to your kids? Are you familiar with American YouTuber Rick Beato? His son developed perfect pitch at a very young age. All right, so there's a lot of stuff for me to respond to. So first of all, what are the benefits of learning musical instruments? I want to talk about that. How I learned to play different instruments. The question whether I'm planning to teach music to my kids. And if I'm familiar with Rick Beato and his son, called Dylan, who has perfect pitch. I also received a comment at some point recently from someone asking me to give a quick tour of the instruments in my room, all these guitars, and to talk about them a little bit. Now, I talked about my guitars a little bit in a recent episode, but I'm happy to do it again, very happy to do it again. Let me do that in a few minutes. First of all, let me just answer those questions. First of all, the benefits of learning musical instruments, obviously, it's obvious. First of all, you get to be able to play music, which is just a joy and a pleasure. Secondly, it can be really good if you can play instruments because it sort of allows you to socialize. You meet people, you get into bands, and it kind of gives you a thing to do with other people, which is a really cool way of meeting other people, having really great experiences. Playing music with others is just a great social thing, and it can be a great way to meet people and just have a great time. And it's just lovely to be able to play music. So it's definitely something that's worth doing. It takes a lot of practice, a lot of time. It's a bit like learning a language, you know. It really helps if you just love it, if you just feel that you want to pick up a guitar, for example, and play it. It's difficult. It's really difficult at the beginning. Like, especially playing the guitar, you've got to, your hands do not want to make the different shapes. You end up, as you try to make the different chords, as you try to press down the strings in the right shapes, your other fingers accidentally touch the other strings, and it all sounds terrible. Hold on a minute. Let me get my guitar. Just try and demonstrate what I'm talking about. That's out of tune. That'll do, won't it? Hold on, folks. I'm going to have to just get my computer here as well to make sure I can capture this. Okay. So what I was trying to say is that, for example, learning the different chord shapes, you have to put your fingers over the frets. You have to press the strings down against the fretboard so that essentially the strings become a different length. And because when the strings are a different length, they create a different tone, right? So that's the bottom E string, but then when you press it against the third fret, the string becomes shorter, and as a result the sound wave is different, and you end up with a G note, and then a bit further up you get an A, the basic principles of the guitar. And then you learn when a guitar is tuned in a certain way, like this, just standard tuning. You learn that certain shapes, putting your fingers on certain strings at certain frets, create different chords, right? But that that takes a long time to learn, just learning the shapes so that your fingers automatically just go in the right places. And it's so frustrating at the beginning. First of all, it's very painful, bending your wrist over, bending your fingers over so that they rest in the right places, then being able to do it with enough strength so that your fingers actually press down on the strings so that a decent sounding chord comes out. Is very hard work. It hurts your thumb, it hurts your wrist, and it hurts the ends of your fingers, right? I mean, if when I play the guitar, I get these sort of these marks on my fingers where the strings have pressed against them. So that takes a long time, lots and lots of practice. Going back to the question, what was the question again? Anyway, the benefits of learning musical instruments, I think they're probably obvious. How did I learn to play different instruments? I started actually when I was about 11 years old, and I decided I wanted to learn to play the piano. So I'm just going to try and give you the quick version here, because obviously we've been going now for an hour and 40 minutes, so I don't want to make this like too long, although, as we've discovered before, podcast episodes can be long, and it's fine. So when I was about 11, our next door neighbour in the house next to us, he played the piano. He was probably about 3 or 4 years older than me, and he was like a cool guy, you know. I thought he was a cool guy, and he was really good on the piano, and he learned with a piano teacher to play certain things. He was able to play The Entertainer, Scott Joplin, on the piano, and he also learnt music from the film Ghostbusters. There's a certain scene in the original film where the Ghostbusters have a job, and they have to quickly get ready and go out to catch a ghost. And there's like this kind of honky tonk kind of blues rock and roll piano playing throughout it. And he learned to play that, and he could play it really, really well. And I would just watch him do it with my jaw on the floor, you know, like that. It was so cool. And I just really wanted to do it too. And another thing is, we got a little Casio keyboard, and I learned to play some of the keyboard lines from some of my favourite songs. Like, for example, there was this New Order song with the England football team, and I learnt to play all the keyboard parts on it on my own. And I thought, wow, I can kind of do this. This is cool. And so I said to my mum, I'd like to have piano lessons, please. She was delighted, of course, and set me up to have lessons with the same teacher that my neighbour had lessons with. But the teacher taught me classical piano. He taught me, he was like, right, I'm going to do this properly. You're going to learn properly. You're going to learn to read music. You're going to learn theory. You're going to take the classical grades. And in the UK, we have 8 grades. When you get to grade 8, it means that you're a really good musician. I don't know at what stage you can sort of play in a professional orchestra or something. So for about 5 years, I learned piano theory, and I practiced the piano for half an hour or an hour every single day. And at the beginning, I was like really disciplined, and I practiced a lot, and I got quite good really for my... I made pretty good progress in the first 3 years especially, and I got a distinction in for my first grade, grade 1 piano. I got a distinction. I got a distinction for grade 2. And I was like a little bit of a prodigy almost on the piano, doing really well. Everyone was saying lots of really good positive things about me. As time went on, my focus slipped somewhat, and I got distracted by other things, maybe because schoolwork started to become more of a challenge, but also other things started to get involved. And for one reason or another, I found it harder to focus on it. And so I wasn't quite as good as I used to be, but I was still pretty good. So for grade 3, grade 4 and grade 5, I got merits. I got a merit, a merit and a merit. So distinction is the best, merit is the next best, and then pass is the sort of the third best thing you can get, a bit like ABC. So I got distinction, distinction, merit, merit, merit. By the time I got to basically at that point I was 16 years old, and it just wasn't really interesting for me anymore, and I was much more interested in other kinds of music. The classical music didn't really mean anything to me. I couldn't really get into it. It's a pity because now I understand it a lot more and I feel like I appreciate it a lot more, but back then it just wasn't really my thing, and I was much more interested in sort of like all these other types of music like hip hop and even jazz music and funk and, you know, like techno and stuff like that. And so I decided I didn't want to do it anymore. And it was a bit of a sad moment. I had to call the teacher, who was a really good teacher, who really believed in me. I had to call him and sort of say, look, you know, I'm going to take a break from playing the piano and maybe I can start again after the summer. And he just sort of said to me, okay, Luke, okay, well, all right, you know, maybe speak to you again soon. But I could just tell in the way that he was talking to me that he knew that I was giving up. And I felt relieved afterwards. I felt like, I don't have to do that anymore. Now, around about the same time as when I was still doing piano lessons and stuff, but I wasn't so interested in it anymore, other forms of music became really interesting to me, and I was into all that stuff like Jimi Hendrix and the Beatles and Madness and stuff. I remember one day, my dad had a guitar and he used to play the guitar, and I would sometimes pick it up and try to do things, but I couldn't really work out how to do it because the guitar and the piano are really, really different. But I used to sort of like mess around a little bit, but I had no idea. But then one day at school, this kid in my year came in with this bass guitar. It was like a Fender P-Bass copy. It wasn't a Fender, it was some cheap copy of a Fender, and he brought it in. And at that time I was the music prefect. So a prefect is someone who has a sort of special responsibility for something in the school. And I was responsible for the music room. So I was about 14, 15 years old, 14, 15, 16, that kind of time. And basically, as the music prefect, I got to wear a badge, first of all, which said I was a prefect. And secondly, I was allowed to use the music room at break times and at lunch times, and I was responsible for tidying it up, cleaning it up. But I got to use the music room. And so I used to hang out in the music room, and some of my friends would hang out there too. And one day, this kid brought in this bass, and I was like, let's have a go on that. My friend wanted to buy it, but he could not play it to save his life, and he got really frustrated. But I picked up the bass, and I was able to do a few things. Like I was able to do this. Right, which is Come As You Are, right? Nirvana. I'll stick with this guitar. I was going to play the bass for a moment, but I'll show you that in a minute. And so I was the one who actually bought the guitar. So this kid was selling the guitar for like 10, 15 pounds or something ridiculous. So my friend bought it, but he couldn't play it, so I bought it from him. And so then I had this bass, and I would sit at home, right, doing that, but I didn't have anything to plug it into, so I would sit playing an unplugged bass. Right, and I'd be doing that, and I'd be doing... That's it. Things like that. And I learnt to play the bass. Now, also kind of a basic... I learned to play basic bass lines, just copying songs that I heard, things like that. And then... But also, because I was playing the piano, my mum and dad wanted to encourage my brother to play something. And we had this garage that was separate from the house. Sort of like this room in the garden. And they bought a drum kit because my dad used to play the drums when he was younger. So they bought a drum kit and they thought maybe my dad could play, he could teach my brother to play, he could teach me to play. So they bought this drum kit with the idea that maybe my brother would learn to play, and he did. James learned to play the drums. He ended up in like these bands at school and at college. It was really great, and we had this room where we could rehearse. And I started playing the drums as well, and I realised that that was really the cool thing, and that was the thing I really liked to do. And so I would go, instead of playing the piano, I'd be going in there and sitting on the drums and just playing and trying to like copy the way that Ringo played on certain records, and I'd try and copy all of my drum heroes. And then I got really into the drums, and whenever I listened to music, if I listened to Jimi Hendrix, I would be listening to Jimi Hendrix's drummer, you know, Mitch Mitchell, and just be fascinated by what Mitch Mitchell was doing. When I listened to The Police, I listened to Stuart Copeland. I wasn't really interested in what the others were doing. I was just listening to Stuart Copeland. And so I got really obsessed with the drums, but I also played a bit of bass as well. But really the drums was the thing I got into. And then, you know, just got into bands because it was the cool thing to do with friends I met at college when I went to college, and I ended up in bands because that was sort of like cool, you know, and sort of thing that girls would be impressed by, or at least I thought that girls would be impressed by that. I don't know if they really were, but that's kind of how I learnt to play bass and drums, just by copying records. I didn't really learn any theory. I don't really have a lot of technique. If you see me playing the bass, I'm sure that my fingering is wrong, because like on the piano, when you play the piano, that fingering is really important, making sure that you know you're playing the notes with the right fingers so that you can easily move your hand up and down the keyboard. It's the same thing with the guitar and the bass. You've got to be using certain fingering, but my fingering is probably quite kind of sketchy, and I'm just all over the place really. I just play by feel and by just by trying to copy things, and every now and then these days I just pick up the bass and play, and just do my best and just try and have fun with it. So that's kind of how I learnt to do those things. The guitar came later, and that really, all I wanted to do was just learn to do all the chords. And I bought myself an acoustic guitar when I was in my 20s, a cheap Yamaha acoustic guitar, and I would just try and play. And I didn't really know a lot of stuff. Like, I know most of the chords now. I can play most of the major minor chords, some of the other more complex ones I can do as well, and I can do some of those movements where you kind of you know, those sorts of little transitions between chords. I can do some of those things. I can't really play lead guitar. That's all that, you know, shredding guitar solos. I can't do any of that stuff. I can play a bit of funk guitar, because I'm basically a drummer, so it's like a drummer. I'll just play the drums on the guitar, just playing the sort of same chords over and over again. So there you go. That's how I learnt to play different instruments. Kind of self-taught really, and you can tell. With the guitar, I'm not sophisticated. I can just play basic chords to just maybe accompany a few songs. Can't do the lead stuff. I probably play things wrong, and I can't do that finger picking, which is really the best thing to do on the guitar. That's where I can't do it. I'm cheating there, because finger picking is where you essentially, your right hand, which is strumming the strings, sort of does several things at the same time. So your thumb is playing bass lines, and while your thumb is doing that, your fingers are kind of going. I can't really do it at all. So I'm very limited on the guitar, really. Am I planning to teach music to the kids? Yes, definitely. And in fact, my daughter already goes. She went to violin classes at school for a year, but that didn't work out. And anyway, I mean, who wants to play the violin anyway? I mean, okay, she could play in an orchestra and play all the classical music, but really, I think the best instruments are the guitars, keyboards, and drums, I would say, because I'm interested in like pop music, rock music, jazz, you know, all those sorts of things, rather than classical music. So I want her to be able to learn an instrument that she will be able to play in a band with other people, because that's that's, I think, the most fun and the most accessible thing as well. So at my daughter's school, they have a sort of music room, and they have pretty good music lessons. They do classical music though, but that's all right. I think it's important to have a basis in classical music and to understand music theory. I think that's really good, really important, and definitely can be very, very helpful, because you can apply that to playing other instruments and just apply that to playing music later in your life. So I'm like, for example, I'm really glad that I did those 5 or 6 years of piano lessons, because I think it did instill something in me. I don't really remember a lot of the theory now. When I sit down at a piano and try to read music, I can't really do it anymore. So I've lost a lot of that stuff that I learned. But I think it instilled a certain kind of comfort, confidence, and love for playing music, which hopefully I will always have. I wish I could be better, as always, but it's all right. The main thing is that you have fun. So anyway, with my kids, yes, my daughter's got music classes at school, which we enroll her in, and she's going to start doing piano lessons in September at the school. I hope that she enjoys it. I hope it's not too boring and too serious, and I hope that she actually gets into it. We're going to set up I've got a piano here, an electric piano. We're going to set that up in our flat, and or a smaller one in her room. Let her put the headphones on and play and practice, because she'll have homework. And hopefully hopefully she will get it. She'll be into it. But I don't want to be imposing it on her or my son when he's old enough. I don't want to feel like it's an imposition, because so many of us are forced to play instruments and we hate it. And that's not very healthy for playing music later. Instead, I want to encourage a love of playing music and a love of instruments. And I've got a guitar and a ukulele at home in the apartment, which are always there, and I pick them up and play them quite a lot. And hopefully that will inspire my kids to pick them up. Like my son, for example, who's still basically a baby. He can't walk yet, but he spends a lot of time staring up at the guitar on the wall and is fascinated by it. I take it down from the wall and play it in front of him, and he really loves to. His eyes light up, and so hopefully that means that I'm instilling a sort of fascination and love for the guitar in him that maybe one day will come back and he'll choose to pick up a guitar and will be motivated enough to get through those difficult first couple of years, maybe even, towards a point where he's actually very fluent and comfortable on the guitar. That would be fantastic. The ukulele, there's a ukulele in my daughter's bedroom, another one, a kind of a slightly cheaper one, which just I leave next to her bed on the floor, and every now and then she does pick it up. The other day she picked it up, brought it into our bedroom. My wife and I were still in bed Saturday morning. She came in with the ukulele and improvised this song in front of us. I was like showing her how to hold it. It's like, no, she had it. She was lying it down on the bed and strumming it like that in front of her. And I said, no, you've got to hold it like this. Put your left arm under it, round it, and strum it like that. And she did. She wasn't really playing any chords, although I showed her the most simple ukulele chord that there is, which is the C chord, which is just one finger on one fret. Right? You've got C and C seventh, which is literally, you can play them with one finger. And others, there are other chords which are really easy on the ukulele. So, and she did this song, she improvised it. She sings a lot, she's always singing, and she's pretty good. She comes up with some pretty catchy little lyrics and things that she improvises. All she needs to do, I think, is just have the ukulele, and I think we'll be taking a step in the right direction. So, I'm just kind of like leaving a ukulele around, hoping that she will just pick it up and start playing it of her own accord, which will then feed into a sense that music is her thing, and then she will hopefully sort of carry on doing it. Am I familiar with Rick Beato? Yes, I am definitely familiar with Rick Beato. He's a very successful YouTuber. He's the guy, I don't know how old he is now. He's a baby boomer kind of guy who has an incredible level of knowledge, not just about music and music theory, but about the music industry. I think he was a music producer. He's an extremely accomplished guitarist, a multi-instrumentalist. He's a fascinating person to watch on YouTube. He does these really interesting videos where he, for example, breaks down the music behind certain popular songs. He's got his opinions. He's got his opinions about modern music, and he thinks that a lot of it's not very good. He does these fascinating interviews with great musicians, like he did an interview with Sting and an interview with Sting's guitarist, what's his name, Dominic Miller. He also interviewed Stuart Copeland and Andy Summers from The Police and a number of other great artists. So yeah, I'm really familiar with Rick Beato. He's great. I think he's really good. And yeah, his son, called Dylan, is kind of famous on his channel because he has perfect pitch. Perfect pitch is basically where you are able to identify notes in a scale just by hearing them without seeing them written in notation, and without seeing them being played. You can close your eyes, play a note on the piano and say what note it is. And Dylan is amazing at this, and there are videos of Rick Beato with his son Dylan. Dylan has got his back to the piano. Rick is playing these quite sophisticated jazz chords, and Dylan is naming the chord and singing each note in the chord independently. It's stunning. Some people on the internet have suggested that they're cheating and that Dylan knows what the chord is going to be. But, I mean, when you watch the video, it doesn't seem to be cheating. It seems to be that he's genuinely not only naming the chords, but singing each individual note separately. It sounds like he's got perfect pitch, and I believe it. I think probably Rick Beato is so musically talented, and he's so fluent and clear in the way that he talks about music theory. He's probably been playing the piano to Dylan, breaking down chords, explaining the musical theory to Dylan in clear ways, that Dylan's natural musical ability has been realized and has developed really, really well as a result. So I can't really teach my kids musical theory in the same way that Rick Beato can, because I'm not an expert in music. I can teach my daughter the chords on the ukulele and the guitar. You know, I can teach her basic things about melody and harmony and rhythm, and when she's old enough, I'm definitely going to take her to a local music studio where they have a drum kit, they have amplifiers, and I'll sit her behind the drum kit and I'll show her, look, here's how you play the drums. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 with your right hand on this thing, which is called a hi-hat, tit, 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 like that. And 3 on the 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3 and 7 with your left hand on this drum that goes fuck like that. So that's ka, right? And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 and 5 with your foot. Ka, right? And there you go. That's like the basis of everything. And I'll get her to do it, and hopefully she'll enjoy going doomed, ga, if she can learn to do that, because playing the drums is like really about learning to do different things with different parts of your body. It's like tapping your head and rubbing your tummy at the same time. Can you do it? Can you tap your head while you rub your tummy? You know, it's kind of like that. So you end up being able to do different beats on with different arms and feet, and if she gets comfortable, then while she's doing it, I'll gladly, I'll play along with her and hopefully inspire her to kind of get into playing music. I hope that's the idea. I've just realised I've got to go now. I've got to go and pick up my son from daycare. I haven't finished this episode though, because what I wanted to do was give you a little tour of my room and show you the different guitars and even play them for you. I don't know if there's going to be time for that, but there's more I wanted to do in this episode, including play a song at some point. So what I'm going to do is I'll stop here and I'll just simply continue tomorrow afternoon. I'm teaching in the morning, and then I'm going to have lunch, and then when I come back here, I think I'll carry on. Okay, so, all right, thanks for listening up until this point. I think if you've got to this point, the chances are you're going to listen to the whole thing, right? Yeah, nice one. Okay, I'm going to do that magic thing where I click my fingers, and when I've clicked my fingers, we'll have jumped forward nearly 24 hours to tomorrow afternoon, and I'll finish this episode then with slightly different clothes. Okay, let's do that right now. Here we go. There you go. 21 hours, about 21 hours have passed, and we're back again. So we just flew through time, or at least I did. And here we go. And it's still pissing down with rain outside. So conditions have not really changed, except for the fact that 21 hours have passed and we're now into the future in some form, even though it's all the same to you. Right. So let's carry on, shall we? Let's see if we can get this done. Let's get this done. Let's do this. Okay, so intentions and plans for upcoming episodes. I thought that I would just kind of give you an idea of what's going to come up on the podcast over the next couple of months. So as I continue to read from the PDF here, I get quite a lot of requests for the most popular types of episode. Stories, articles, explaining things like jokes, song lyrics, and the walk and talk episodes as well. I think those are, at the moment, as far as I can tell, the most popular type of episode. Although, I think probably there's people out there who've got like their own preferences. Some people prefer episodes with my friends and family. Other people prefer rambling episodes. You know, there's like different preferences out there. But I do get quite a lot of requests in comment sections for those episodes I just mentioned. And I want to do these things, but they do take time. Finding the right materials, finding ways to present the topics, choosing language to highlight and explain, and preparing that a bit. And overall, preparing the visuals for the video version, so notes, text for the screen, etc. It all takes time. And I'm always working on lots of different episodes at the same time. Rambling episodes usually take less preparation, like I said at the beginning of the episode. So when time is tight, I can do them, buying myself more time to prepare other episodes. That was the idea behind this one, although it ended up taking, more time, of course, just like everything does. What's wrong with my relationship with time? Why do I always think things are going to take less time than they actually do? I suppose it's kind of wishful thinking. It's also the fact that I just want to talk about everything all at the same time, Anyway, continuing the text here. Stories. So I'm working on several story episodes at the moment, including some that I'm writing myself, and that requires a bit of extra work, as you can imagine. I'm trying to make the stories as good as possible. Being a good writer is tricky. It's hard to compete with the likes of Roald Dahl, Catherine Brush, etc. I'm also looking for interesting true stories and anecdotes written on sites like Quora, Reddit, etc. Right? So I'm always on the lookout for stories. So I'm searching for and preparing short stories all the time. I've also been playing around with AI to see if it can create stories which I think are good enough. Most of the time, the stories written by ChatGPT, for example, are not quite right. They just lack a certain special something. AI stories often don't include the details which make stories come alive. And this means things like bits of dialogue or moments of humour or other human elements. But they can provide a starting point which I can work on. So I'm working with some AI stories to try to develop them into the kind of thing I can use on the podcast. Articles, episodes made using articles. Now it's the same as above really, basically. I'll read out more articles and explain language I find in them, as well as discussing the topics. It also takes time to prepare this kind of thing. There are lots of articles online which I can adapt. So, there'll be more article episodes. Another thing, explaining things and explaining song lyrics. I haven't done that very much, but I've had a few requests. I think maybe since I talked about music recently, I've had people sort of suggest this, because it's made them think that maybe that's something else I could do. So I have a couple of episodes like this in the pipeline, stories based around songs where I talk about the lyrics, and also the stories behind the way the songs were written. And these couple of episodes, they both involve actually singing the songs to you, which might result in copyright strikes and loss of revenue on YouTube. So that might not be the wisest thing for me to do, but we'll see. I wanted to also mention that for me, even now, I still feel like every episode is an experiment. Do you see what I mean? I feel like that every episode I do, it still feels like I'm experimenting with things, almost trying things out, experimenting to see what works and what doesn't work. And I always want to keep things fresh and new, or at least I feel like I do. I don't want it to become too formulaic, although it probably is. Also, walk and talk episodes. I'm waiting for the good weather to return, if that ever does happen. And then I'll go for a walk with my camera and microphone by the river this time, and I'll talk about a specific topic. I think my next topic in the list is health and keeping fit. That's probably going to be the next thing I talk about, but I might change my mind. But at the moment, the next thing in the list of walk and talk topics is health and keeping fit. And I've got some questions and some phrasal verbs and stuff, and I can talk about the topic, include the phrasal verbs in my questions and in my answers, and visit another nice part of town, and then maybe do a premium episode where I deal with the explaining and demonstrating the language that came up in my answers, those phrasal verbs and things. Also, conversations with guests, friends, family, other people. It's important for you to hear conversations, I think, especially with people you are less familiar with. Often, I think it's the conversations that are harder to follow. This is what I have noticed in responses to my episodes, that people say that often when I have guests, people sort of comment that they can't understand the guests. But this is just because, I think, probably just because you're less familiar with their voices and the particular way that they speak. But also it might just be because they're not English teachers, and they don't have experience of talking to non-native speakers, which doesn't just mean speaking slowly, but just kind of being aware of the people who are listening to you, and just perhaps understanding which things need to be explained, like which little references and things need to be explained, and making sure that you're not using too much idiomatic language which can alienate people who aren't familiar with them. Anyway, conversations with guests. It's important for you to hear conversations, I think. And as my PDF continues, if you understand me all the time, this is fine, and it's good to get comprehensible input. But if you only ever listen to me, then you could get a slightly false sense of your own ability, and you'll be able to understand other people. And there's a chance you'll be unable to understand other people, right? You'll get a slightly false sense of your own listening ability, and you'll be unable to understand other people. And there's a chance you will end up with that attitude of thinking, meh, these people don't speak properly. I will only put up with properly spoken English, which would be a pity, because not only does that sound a bit snobbish, it also would betray the fact that your listening skills aren't quite up to scratch. So my point there is that you can't just listen to me all the time. You have to be exposed to other people speaking so that you don't get a false sense of your own listening ability. Do you see what I mean? Whereas also it is important to listen to someone whose voice is clear, that you understand a lot, because this is the basis of comprehensible input. But it's always a double-sided thing, I think, learning a language, that it's always about balance. That on one hand, yes, listen to something that's easy for you to understand, something that's clear, but also on the other hand, you've got to get familiar with slightly less clear speech as well. Kind of balance those things out. So anyway, more conversations will come. And also, conversation episodes for me are a chance to socialize with other people, and I enjoy collaborating and having conversations with people. I find that to be enjoyable. If I just did this all on my own all the time, I'd get a bit lonely, wouldn't I? Yeah. Sad music. You can imagine some sad music now of me being lonely all on my own. So I like doing episodes with other people, and I hope that you like them as well. So another type of episode, that's the Rick Thompson report. Remember that, the Rick Thompson report? Haven't done one for quite a long time. Maybe the last time I did an episode like that was when I talked to my mum, my dad and my mum, because normally the Rick Thompson report is just with my dad, but last time I think it was the Rick and Jill Thompson report, where I talked to both my parents about the coronation of King Charles III. We talked about that, but the Rick Thompson report was a regular series that I did mostly around the time of Brexit, but also after Brexit and stuff. And I talked to my dad about politics in the UK, basically. My dad, as you may know, is a former broadcast journalist, similar to what Barbara Serra used to do, although he wasn't really a presenter. He was more a producer or editor of the news. He used to work for the BBC for 30 years. So anyway, in episodes of the Rick Thompson report, I just talk to my dad and ask him what's going on in British politics, and he kind of talks about it in his characteristic way. Very popular episodes. So the Rick Thompson report, we haven't done one for a while, but as it says here on my PDF that I wrote before, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, not for long. I mean, he won't be the Prime Minister for long. And what's the date when you're listening to this? Well, probably by the second week of July, he probably won't be the Prime Minister anymore. And that's just a prediction. Well, we don't know, but I expect. Most people seem to think that the Conservatives will be out after the next election. But anyway, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak recently announced a general election in the UK, which is due to take place. Is it the 4th of July? He announced a general election in the UK, seemingly taking most of the governing Conservative Party by surprise, making it clear that the party is surely doomed. But what's going on in UK politics in this big election year? I feel a Rick Thompson report coming on. It's been a while, hasn't it? Why? Well, my dad is retired, and so I don't want to hassle him to do like journalism for free, of course. Also, he's been fairly busy writing a third book, and I'll interview him about that when it's ready. But I think it'll be time to do at least one Rick Thompson report about the general election, maybe one before and one after the election. We can talk about that. Maybe my mum can be involved in it as well. Anyway, back to conversation episodes. I have about 5 of them in the pipeline, and I'm spreading them out a bit. Right, I'm publishing them one by one, but with solo episodes in between. So it'll be something like conversation episode, solo episode, conversation episode, solo, conversation solo, and so on. Right, but you can expect a couple of work-related episodes coming up. Those are conversation ones, including one about job interviews and one about networking in English. Also, there'll be one with a friend of mine who is a journalist who lived in China for 3 years. That's Charles, who I'm doing the comedy show with on the 19th of July at 8:30 in a place called Au Soleil de la Butte in Montmartre in Paris. So there'll be an episode with him, and also one with Alistair from English Learning for Curious Minds, in which we do a sort of true crime episode. Okay, so all that will be coming up over the next few weeks, along with some solo episodes, which are still coming together, which I'm still working on. Summer will be busy. It's going to be a busy summer as normal. Will LEP be affected? So August off and a busy June and July. As usual at this time of year, I always say this at this time of year, I reckon that there might be no episodes for a while in the summer, as I'm unable to record anything for some periods, certainly in August, but also during parts of July. So normally at this time I start to panic and think I'm not going to be able to publish anything, and everyone's going to, everyone will just stop listening to Luke's English podcast and they'll forget all about me because I won't be publishing episodes. This is what us podcasters are concerned about, that we have to keep pumping out the output. We have to keep publishing episodes, because if there's a period with nothing, then everyone just forgets about us and moves on. This is what we wake up. This is what we have nightmares about, and wake up in the middle of the night sort of sweating. Oh God, no episodes. This is the sort of thing that happens. But anyway, I won't be able to record in August because we'll be away, and also during parts of July. So I'm teaching a couple of intensive English courses at the British Council in June and July, which means teaching all day and then rushing home to look after the kids, and no time for podcasting, just collapsing and recovering in the evenings when the kids are in bed. So during the intensive courses, no podcasting will be possible, probably. It also might be brutally hot at that time. In August, we're going away on holiday for about 3 weeks, and so I'll be away from my computer and all my stuff. I won't be able to do anything. Okay, won't be able to do any recording. I might be able to bring like a portable microphone with me and stuff, but I'll be on holiday. So like last year, I'm going to try to record as many episodes as possible in the next few weeks in order to have a backlog which I can publish during July and August to cover my absence. But I might not manage it. Time is tight, so there might be no episodes in August, but please don't forget about Luke's English podcast. It'll return in September when I have more time at my disposal. I will try to make sure there's premium content all the way through the summer. So that's 2 episodes a month at a minimum. So it's going to be a busy time the next few weeks. I'm going to be making a lot of episodes in order to cover for the absence. But I think if there is an absence, it's all right. I think you won't forget about me, will you? And I think they say absence makes the heart grow fonder. So in fact, the fact that I'm not here all the time will make you miss me. I have plenty of other ideas for episodes. It's all just a matter of time management. Episode 900 is coming up, and then I've got my sights set on episode 1000, another nice milestone. I don't know what I'll do for episode 900. It feels like I should celebrate the milestone like I normally do. I don't know what I'll do. I might do a YouTube live or something like that. I might do a live episode, although they can be tricky because what happens is we just get millions of comments in the comment section from people, and it's all a little bit difficult to deal with. It becomes a bit overwhelming. But, it could be a fun thing to do anyway. I might try it and see. So another question. Luke, can you tell us a bit about the guitars in your room? Right? Can you tell us a little bit about the guitars in your room? I can't remember who asked me this recently, but every now and then, people see the guitars and stuff I've got on the walls and they ask me to talk about them. And of course, I would be very happy to do that. I'd love to talk about the guitars and things. I'm going to now give you a little tour of the instruments in this room. I'll try to give you just 1 or 2 brief bits of information about each one, maybe brief stories about how I got the guitars or something else related to them, and I'll see if I can play them all for you a bit. Certainly the bass guitars that I've got here, because I do have something set up so I can plug in my electric guitars, my electric bass guitars. I can plug them in and you'll be able to hear me playing them a little bit. So I'm going to tell you about my instruments. So let's start with the ukulele, which I had out earlier on. Obviously, people listening in audio land, you can't see these things, so I'm just going to have to describe them. The first thing I've got here is a ukulele. I can't remember what type of ukulele it is. Is it a soprano? Is it a concert ukulele? I can't remember. It's quite small, but it's not the smallest model because ukuleles come in different sizes, right? So this one is just the size up from the smallest. It's the second smallest size, and they do get smaller than this, and ukuleles are unbelievably cute instruments. They're just lovely, happy-go-lucky little instruments that, if played well, if you just know the right chords, they can be a really lovely little accompaniment to some singing, So this one that I've got, I bought it a few years ago from a shop up the road from where I live, and what's it made of? I can't remember what this is made of now. I'm afraid I can't remember, but it's made by a company called Aria. Obviously, it's made of wood. I just can't remember what kind of wood this is. But it's a lovely kind of reddish brown coloured wood. And this one, ukuleles are, because they're smaller, they're cheaper, right? Aria is a Japanese company, but this one I think was made in China. I think these Aria ukuleles are made in China. Which is another reason why it was so affordable. It was like less than €100, but it's actually a really good one. And I checked them out online, and the reason why this one is actually pretty good is that it's got a solid top. Right, this is going to get a little bit geeky as I talk about sort of guitars and the ways that they're made and stuff like that. But who knows, maybe you'll learn something if you don't know about this stuff already. Maybe you'll learn a thing or two. So when it comes to guitars and ukuleles, often one of the... When it comes to guitars and ukuleles, the way that they're constructed is obviously really important. And the top is a really, really important part of a guitar or ukulele. The top is the sort of... the wood that the main part of the body is made from. That's the main surface, right, that you can see. So that's a piece of wood. Then you've got the wood that goes around the sides, and then you've got the piece of wood on the back. Then there's the neck and the headstock. And often on a ukulele, it's the same piece of wood, right? Just the neck and the headstock are all made of one piece of wood. And you've got the fretboard as well, which is another section of wood that's put there. That's what you press your fingers up against. And then there are the frets, which are the little metal strips which go up the fretboard or fingerboard. You've got the tuning heads, and so there you go. Now the thing is about the what makes a guitar or ukulele quite good often is if that main top, the piece of wood on the top of the guitar, if it's made of one solid piece of wood, because often they'll be made of like bits of wood that have been stuck together with glue. But if it's a solid top, that means it's one single piece of wood, and that's better because it will probably project the sound a little bit better. If it's made of a composite top, like lots of bits of wood stuck together, for some reason the sound doesn't sort of reverberate quite as nicely as when it's made from a single solid top. So that's why I bought this, because it had a solid top, even though it's like they say instruments made in China are normally a little bit cheaper, and often the construction is not quite as good. These ones are actually really good because they've got that solid top, and it's got a lovely colour. And another thing about this, I'm going to play it in a moment. Another thing about this is the strings that I chose, and I actually bought some fairly expensive strings. I can't remember exactly what they're made of, but they're really good quality, thick, white strings, and the strings make a huge difference. That's a really important thing about a ukulele. You can probably get a fairly cheap ukulele that you buy on the internet or something. You can get them pretty cheap, but a good way to really improve the sound of a ukulele is to sorry, I'm just fiddling with my camera. A good way to improve the sound of a ukulele is to change the strings and to put some nice, good quality strings on. That can make a big difference. No, I played a bum note. Okay, let's play something on it. Is it in tune? Come a little bit closer, hear what I have to say. Just like children sleeping, we can dream this night away. Right, okay. That was just a little taste of Harvest Moon by Neil Young. Okay, so that's my ukulele. I don't play it as much as I should do, but there you go. Voila! Whoa, 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 whoa! Don't fall over. Okay, what else? What's next? This guitar. Okay, you've seen this guitar already today, but I'm going to show it to you again. So This guitar here is the newest one that I've got, and I bought this about a year ago. Is it in tune? I think so. So this is a Taylor, right? Not Paul Taylor, but a Taylor, which is a decent brand of guitar. This is a Taylor GS Mini made of mahogany, and I definitely recommend Taylor guitars. My God, they're really good. They've got a lovely tone, lovely clear tone to them. And this is a slightly shorter. This one's got a slightly shorter neck because this room is so small that I don't want a guitar that's going to be banging into things. I want something smaller, so that's why I bought this. To be honest, I have to say it's a little bit too small because I like to use a capo on my guitar. Where is my capo? Where the flipping heck is it? A capo is a thing, I've talked about this before. I must have bored you to death with the things that I've repeated on this podcast over the years. Where on earth is my capo? Okay, there it is. All that faffing around earlier, and I couldn't tidy up my desk fully. A capo is a clip that goes onto the neck of the guitar, and essentially just allows you to kind of change the key that you're playing in. Right. So, and that's useful if, for example, like me, if your voice, if you don't have the full range and you need to change the key of the song you're playing, but you don't want to change the chord shapes that you're playing with your fingers, you just put the capo on, and it might fit your voice a bit better. But it does mean that as you get further up, as you put the capo further up the neck, the frets become much, much smaller, to the point where I can't really play it so well. It's difficult to fit my fingers onto the frets as you get higher up. If I was playing with a normal size guitar with a longer neck, the frets would be bigger. It would be easier for me to do that. So, I feel like maybe I should get I might need to sell this one and get actually a full-size guitar, because it does end up getting a bit tricky for me to play. That's my acoustic guitar with metal strings. Then I've got also a Spanish style guitar, or classical style guitar, which is a Cordoba C5, which I bought around the time of lockdown, I think. And the Spanish style guitars, or classical ones, they've got a wider neck, so there's more space between the strings, which if you're playing classical music or something, that's really useful, because all that space allows you to really pick out each string more easily, but it is a little bit harder. That you've got to stretch your fingers over a greater distance, and also the strings are made of different material. They're made of nylon, certainly the higher level ones. So it makes a different kind of sound. I said before, I'm not a great guitarist. I'm not really a great guitarist by any means. So I know you want to hear me play like John Sebastian Bach. I can't really do it. All I can do is strum some chords. I'll play a song later on one of those guitars. Right, now also I've got bass guitars. Oh dear. I've got a couple of electric guitars too, 6 strings, which I'll just quickly tell you about. So this one, which you might have seen in the background if you ever look at the video versions of these episodes, I've got a Squier Fender Telecaster. And Squier is a company that makes Fender guitars, but they make them much cheaper. So this was the first ever electric guitar I bought, and it doesn't work properly. There's a problem with the electrics, which means that if you plug this in, you just get lots of buzzing sounds, and I need to take the thing apart and resolder and fix it and fix the volume controls and stuff. So it doesn't actually work properly. Plus, it goes out of tune. It's basically a bit knackered, this guitar. I bought it secondhand from a guitar shop in Birmingham. I don't know how old it is, but it's got all sorts of like bits of... It's got like chips where this guitar's been dropped or mistreated, and the paint's been chipped off, which is quite a nice look. I like the fact that it's chipped. It looks good. Whoever used to own this, I think, was in a punk band, because they've scratched with like a compass or something. They scratched the names of a couple of punk bands on the back of the guitar. So Sham 69 is written on here. UK Subs is written on the back, which I quite like, because I quite like those bands. And so there is Fender style guitar made by Squier, made in Korea, this one. And I never play it because, as I said, it doesn't really work. But what am I going to do? I don't want to throw it away. I actually like it. I like the way it looks. And so I want to have it around. You might think, Luke, why do you have so many guitars when you're not like a great guitarist? Yeah, I'm not really a great guitarist, so how can I justify owning these guitars? Well, like, I think probably my uncle says it best when he said to me, I said to him, look, I really want to get this guitar, but I just feel like maybe I don't deserve it, or I'm not quite good enough to own these guitars. And he said to me, look, guitars are meant to be owned. That's the point of them, that they're supposed to be owned. They're meant to be owned. They're not meant to be looked at in shop windows. If you want to get one, just get one, right? You're supposed to own them. And if you don't want it, you can just sell it, which I thought was like, yeah, that's great. That's a really positive way of looking at it. I love these guitars, and I don't want to just stand there staring at them in the windows of shops, kind of wishing I could own it myself, wondering what it would sound like. I mean, I'm a fully grown adult. I can just buy them if I want them. And they weren't too expensive. So I'm now holding another electric guitar, which I think looks absolutely beautiful. This is like that scene in Spinal Tap, isn't it? Where he's like, listen to the sustain on that. You can listen to that. You can't actually hear it, but if it were playing, you could go out for a bite and you'd still be hearing that one.
Do you play do you actually play all these, or?
Well, I play them and I cherish them. Mm-hmm. This is the top of the heap right here. There's no question about it. Look at the flame on that one.
Yes.
Look, I mean, it's quite unbelievable. This one is just. It's perfect. 1959. You can listen.
How much is
just
this?
Listen for a minute. The sustain. Listen to it.
I'm not hearing anything.
You would though if it were playing, because it's famous for its sustain. I mean, you can just hold it.
Well, I mean, so you'd have to.
You can go and have a bite. No, you still be hearing that one.
Yeah.
This is special too. See, look, see, still got the old tagger on it. See, never even played it. See?
You just bought it.
Don't touch it. Don't touch it.
I wasn't going to touch it.
No, don't touch it.
I was just pointing at it.
Well, don't point even.
Don't even point?
No, it can't be played. Never. I mean,
Can I look at it?
No, you've seen enough of that one.
So this is a Fender Stratocaster, and this is a real Fender. This isn't made by Squier. This one is... so Fender make their guitars in several places. You can get there's Fender guitars made in Mexico, and then Fender guitars made in the US. They also make them in Japan as well, I think. And the Mexican-made ones are the cheaper end of the genuine Fenders. So this is a Mexican-made Fender Stratocaster. It's part of the Player series, which are the ones made in Mexico. So it's like an affordable guitar, which is just above the kind of cheapest level of Fender guitars that you can buy. And it just looks absolutely beautiful. It's got this lovely natural finish, which means you can see the grain of the wood with a lovely deep kind of varnish on it. Lovely sort of kind of, I don't know how to describe this kind of colour. It's a sort of a deep orangey red golden varnish. It's just beautiful with a tortoiseshell scratch plate. And so I'd play that to you. I can just play sort of funk music on it, really, and a few little sort of melodies and stuff, and every now and then I play it, and I cherish it, Now I want to talk about bass guitars, because as I said earlier, I'm more of a bass guitarist than anything else. I hope you don't find this all too boring. So the other bass guitars I've got like 4 actually. I've got 2 Fender basses, a jazz bass over there and a P bass. I'll tell you what the difference is between those in a moment. I've also got a Hofner club bass, which is similar to the one that Paul McCartney has, but a slightly different model. And then I've got at the back of the room a ukulele bass, which is actually a ukulele that has big fat polyurethane strings on it, so it makes deep sounds like a bass guitar. So just in case you don't know, a bass guitar is different to a normal guitar because first of all it's got 4 strings on it. Those strings are much thicker. The neck is much longer. Okay, and as a result you end up with much deeper sounds. Okay, so the bass is responsible for all the deep notes, the deep tones that you can hear in songs. So I've got something set up here so I can actually plug these in and play them for you. So with bass guitars, one of the differences is that you don't play solos on them. You can, but most of the time you don't. Instead, the bass forms part of the rhythm section, meaning the kind of the rhythmic foundation of most songs. And you don't play chords on bass normally. Instead, you play single notes. So let's see if I can just set this up here. Okay. Can we hear that? Right, so it's sort of like deeper notes. Now this is a Fender Precision bass, which is one of the earliest forms of bass guitar that was ever made. The difference between the Precision bass and the jazz bass is mainly that the Precision bass has got this single pickup. The pickup is the part that actually converts the vibration of the metal strings into an electrical signal. So they have magnets in there. I don't know exactly how it works, but there are magnets which somehow pick up the vibrations of the strings, and that gets converted into the sound, which can then be amplified and recorded and stuff. The pickups are really important, and the position of the pickups is important. On a P bass, you've got this single pickup. It's actually 2 units, 2 capsules, but they're combined together to form one pickup, and it's placed in this single position sort of in the middle of the body of the guitar. And down here at the bottom you've got 2 controls. One controls the volume of the bass, you just loud or quiet, and the other control is for the tone, the overall tone, going from deep like a deep bass tone to a more treble-y sound. You can go to treble on one end and deep bass on the other end, right? So I tend to just keep it a bit low with a bit of treble added. Now you normally play a bass with your fingers. Right? With your index finger and your middle finger. You can also play with a pick, and there's nothing wrong with playing a bass with a pick. That means a plectrum, little plastic thing that you hold between your fingers. Right, there's nothing wrong with playing a guitar with a pick. There are no rules. Also, you can slap. Right. That's slapping. That's where you hammer the strings with your thumb and pop with your finger, right? And also you can do this. You can kind of pluck and strum with your thumb as well, which is quite nice. Another thing that I like to do is a thing called palm muting, which is where you hold the palm of your right hand against the strings, and it really just kind of deadens the sound. Which is a lovely sound. And let me just try and play along to something. I'm going to play along to a video. What I like to do is go onto YouTube and find drumming videos and just kind of jam along to them. So the one I've got here is called That 70s Sound by a guy called Jake Reed, who is a drummer on YouTube. And this is just like a little video clip that I like to jam along to sometimes. It's just got a nice sound to it. So I'll try and do some bass guitar over this. It's about 50 seconds. Okay, the next one I've got is a Fender jazz bass, and I bought this one pretty recently. It was kind of a treat for myself, because any bass players out there, you'll know that like there are a few different bass guitar models that are the most common ones that people have. I think probably the two big ones are the Fender Precision Bass, which is the one I just showed you, and the Fender Jazz Bass. And the thing is about being a bass guitarist is that it's often really hard to choose which one. Do you have the P bass or do you have the jazz bass? If you buy a P bass, then you always kind of feel like you want to have a jazz bass as well. And if you have a jazz bass, there's always part of you that goes, oh, I'd love a P bass too. And a while ago, I think it's after I got 1 million subscribers on YouTube, I decided I would treat myself to a jazz bass, because I just basically always wanted one, even though I didn't really need it. I've always wanted one of these, so I got one. I got it secondhand. This is a Japanese import. There's a shop in France that sells imported Japanese guitars, and so I got this one used. I don't mind that it's used. It's from the 1990s. And so now I have a Fender jazz bass. The difference between this and the P bass, so the P bass is the model that was like I think the first P basses were made in the 1950s, and the jazz bass came a little bit later in the 1960s, and it was really designed for musicians who wanted to play jazz, but on an electrical guitar, an electric instrument, because before this all the jazz guys had to play those upright double bass, which is just acoustic, right? You can put microphones next to it and stuff, but it's harder to get a proper loud sound, you know. If you want to play a larger concert in front of a bigger audience, you're going to need something that's plugged in. If you want to record yourself in the studio, it's useful to be able to plug yourself in. So the Fender, the company that makes these guitars, designed this. Leo Fender, I think, was the guy who actually designed these guitars. And the difference is, well, the length is, the length of the neck is more or less the same. The body is slightly different. It's got a slightly more contoured body, which is, designed to fit snugly against you comfortably. That's one of the beautiful things about these guitars, is the design, the way that the body has been designed. There's a functionality to the design, in the sense that the body of the guitar, this is true for these bass guitars and these other guitars I've been showing you, especially the electric ones made by Fender, that they're contoured so that they fit neatly against your body. They're comfortable and easy to play. For example, this one, it's scooped out so that it sits against your body. The neck is slightly slightly less wide at the top than the P bass. The idea is that for bass players doing jazz, they do a lot of they do a lot of scales and things. And so the idea is that it's easier to basically play jazz scales on one of these because there's less space between the strings. So that's one feature, the fact that it's a bit slimmer. So it's a little bit easier in a way to get your fingers around the fretboard. But the main thing really is the pickups again. So whereas the P bass has got one single pickup made of 2 units in the middle, on the jazz bass the pickups are separated, so you have 2 pickups. There's one in the middle in this more or less the same position as on the P bass, and then the other pickup is moved closer to the bottom end of the guitar. So this is called the bridge. Okay, the where the strings are attached at the bottom end of the guitar is called the bridge. And the bridge pickup is the one that's closer. And so in terms of the controls, you actually get volume controls for each pickup. So there's a volume control for the what they call the neck pickup, the one right in the middle, closer to the neck of the guitar. And there's a volume control for the bridge pickup, which allows you to get a lot more control over the sounds that you get. So if I just play only the This is just the neck pickup. It's got a deeper, rounder sound. Right, it's kind of a similar sound to the P bass. Now if I just play only the bridge pickup now, you can hear it's got a different sound. Whoops, played the wrong note. It's got a sort of a punchier tone to it. I quite like having both of the pickup volumes up on full, so you're getting both of those sounds combined. Let's have that 70s sound again from the drums. Oh, that string is out of tune. Do you hear that? Anyway, stop drumming. Okay, all right, there you go. So that's that. That's a jazz bass. I know this is fascinating for you, but hopefully, you might be learning something about instruments. And then I think this is going to be the second to last thing I'm going to show you. This finally is my Hofner club bass, which is similar to the Paul McCartney bass. Now, the reason I got this one is because I wanted a sort of more vintage style instrument, like a kind of 60s one, and it's got that old school vintage style. And then last but not least, I have this, which was a gift from my cousin. This is a ukulele bass. It's a cute thing to play. There you go, that might be out of tune. So there you go, that's a little tour of the instruments I've got in this room. I hope that was interesting for you. Was that insightful and interesting? I certainly hope so. I'm going back to the PDF here. One listener asked me recently, Luke, why don't you learn finger picking on the guitar? And basically I can't, it's too difficult. I've tried it and it's really hard work. Did I talk about that earlier? I feel like I did talk about it earlier, but I can't remember because that was yesterday. That's that thing where you get all the different fingers to play a different part. I've tried it, can't do it. Maybe I'll practice. I should. I need to practice. Everything comes with practice, right? It's really about the work, the time you put in pays off eventually. So if I wanted to learn that finger picking stuff, it's just a question of practice. But I spend all my time making podcast episodes, so I don't always have time. Now, I thought that I would end the episode by doing a song. So listeners, if you're still with me, then I guess it's probably all right that you're happy to listen to me just banging on about the stuff I've been banging on about and playing music and stuff. But if, me singing is not your cup of tea, then look away now, or stop listening now, because I'm going to try and do a song at the end here. I think I might need the help. I'm going to need another microphone here, I think. I'm miking up the guitar as well a little bit, although maybe it's probably better. Maybe it would be better if I didn't let you hear my guitar playing in too much detail. I'm so modest. Okay, so I'm going to try and sing this, and it's called Homeward Bound by Simon and Garfunkel. I think it was written primarily by Paul Simon. And I'm just going to play the song. You can listen to the lyrics. After I've played it, I'll go through the lyrics again and just kind of like talk about what they mean. But you can listen to the lyrics and try to work out what it's about. I mean, they're not too complex, I think they're fairly easy to follow and understand. Of course, I need to add the magic reverb. God, that is a lot. That's a lot of reverb, isn't it? That's maybe too much. What happened? The reverb got so extreme. 1, 2. Okay, bit of reverb just to help. Makes a huge difference. Makes my voice sound much better than it actually is. I'm sitting at the railway station, got a ticket for my destination. On a tour of one-night stands, my suitcase and guitar in hand, and every stop is neatly planned for a poet and a one-man band. Homeward bound, I wish I was homeward bound. Home, where my thoughts escaping, home, where my music's playing, home, where my love lies waiting silently for me. Every day's an endless stream of cigarettes and magazines. And each town looks the same to me, the movies and the factories, and every stranger's face I see reminds me that I long to be homeward bound. I wish I was homeward bound. Home, where my thoughts escaping, home, where my music's playing, home, where my love lies waiting silently for me. Tonight I'll sing my songs again, I'll play the game and pretend. But all my words come back to me in shades of mediocrity. Like emptiness in harmony, I'd need someone to comfort me. Homeward bound, I wish I was homeward bound. Home, where my thoughts escaping, home, where my music's playing, home, where my love lies waiting silently for me. Silently for me. There you go. Right, so what's all that about then? Turn off that weird reverb. Okay, so Homeward Bound, Simon and Garfunkel. I'm sitting in the railway station and got a ticket for my destination. So I think the song was written by Paul Simon literally when he was waiting for a train. I don't remember where. Is it when he was at Lime Street Station in Liverpool? It might be. So I'm sitting in the railway station, got a ticket for my destination, on a tour of one-night stands, my suitcase and guitar in hand. On a tour of one-night stands. So this would just be, he's describing the fact that he's on a tour, right? Touring round playing shows. One-night stands are It's got a double meaning. One meaning of one night stand is when you just do one single concert and then move on to the next place. But also a one night stand is when you like sleep with someone just for one night and then you leave and you never see them again. So I suppose is it a double meaning? Is it the fact that he's basically going off doing concerts, maybe meeting people, maybe like having romantic encounters that don't go anywhere, and then just moving on to the next town. So it's like the story of a touring musician who never stays in the same place for more than one night. Okay, got a ticket for my destination on a tour of one night stands, my suitcase and guitar in hand. So there he is at the station with his suitcase and his guitar. And every stop is neatly planned for a poet and a one-man band. So I guess that, he's describing being on tour. I suppose these sorts of tours are neatly planned. Everything is planned out carefully in advance. He's probably got a road manager who's telling him where he needs to be, when he needs to be there. And that's probably, after a long time, that can get very boring and it can get very frustrating, and you can get a bit depressed in that situation where everything's planned out. You never really get to stop and just sort of relax and enjoy yourself and maybe go out and see the place that you're in. Instead, it's just one sort of train station followed by one airport, then you're on stage, then a hotel room, So he's feeling lonely. The chorus goes, homeward bound, meaning I wish I was going in the direction of home. I wish I was going home. Homeward bound, I wish I was homeward bound. I wish I was basically heading for home. Home, where my thoughts escaping. Where his thought or his thoughts are escaping, where his mind is free. Home, where my music's playing, so he's there with his record collection. Home, where my love lies waiting silently for me. So he's got a lover, girlfriend, wife or something who is at home, lying, waiting silently for me. So she's, I guess, in bed or on the sofa, waiting for him to return. So he's longing for the love of his significant other, let's say. Every day is an endless stream of cigarettes and magazines, an endless stream of just like one thing after another. It just never stops. It must be kind of awful being on tour, where you never get any peaceful moments, and the only peaceful moments you get are like sitting in some waiting room in a train station with your guitar. The rest of the time it's just like magazines and cigarettes and people and fans and your manager and tickets and things like that. And each town looks the same to me, the movies and the factories. So you never really get to see the real life in the town. You just see the factories on the outskirts of town, the movie posters, the posters for the same movies which are playing in every single town. And every stranger's face I see reminds me that I long to be homeward bound. I long to be homeward bound, meaning I really want to. He's really wants this. He really hopes for this. He's desperate for it. So all he ever sees is strangers' faces. So he feels lonely among all these people. He just really wants to be homeward bound. And then we get the chorus again. And then verse 3, tonight I'll sing my songs again. So he's imagining himself on stage singing. I'll play the game and pretend. So he's going to kind of put on a facade, right? He's going to perform, which means that he's going to probably put a sort of a metaphysical sort of mask on and pretend to be the genial entertainer who really feels the songs that he's singing for the audience. He's going to put on a performance for them. He's going to pretend that he really feels what he's singing. But he says, but all my words come back to me in shades of mediocrity, which means that as he's singing, he hears himself singing the songs. He hears his lyrics. He hears everything he says. And it, to him, just feels so mediocre, like it's just rubbish. It's not good enough. I can kind of relate to that because certainly as a comedian, when you do your material night after night, the material sort of changes as you do it. Your relationship with the material changes. And at the beginning, it can be very exciting when you've got new material. It's very fresh and sort of meaningful to you. But then as you do it lots and lots and lots of times, and it becomes almost a bit mechanical, you hear yourself saying it and you start to you lose the memory of what was sort of meaningful or funny about it. and you start to convince yourself that it's mediocre. Mediocre just means not very good, like just average, right? So he's saying that as he's performing on stage, not really fully believing what he's doing, the songs he's singing and the words he's saying, he hears himself saying and singing them, and they just sound kind of not very good, you know. He's sort of lost his sense of belief in his own work because he's so jaded by the experience of being on tour. He's so burnt out, and it's not fresh and meaningful to him anymore. Whereas the crowd probably are wrapped, you know, really into it and really swept up by it and really feeling the emotion and passion of the songs. For him, he's just kind of going through the motions. So even in the face of a large crowd, an audience of people who've paid to come and see him and who adore him, he still feels kind of lonely, even in that situation. Lonely, and he feels like his work isn't really good enough. Like emptiness in harmony, I need someone to comfort me. Like emptiness in harmony. So that's interesting. Basically, he needs someone to comfort him in a very profound way, in the same way that harmony needs a certain emptiness within it. Harmony is when different musical notes are played at the same time and they work well together. You need the space between those notes to allow the notes to actually mean anything. So in the same way, he's using this as a sort of a simile for to express how he really needs some love and tenderness and some care, right? All right. Yeah, and that's it. Home, where my music's playing, where my love lies waiting silently for me. What a beautiful, pretty song. And I think that's where we're going to end this episode. Thank you for listening all the way through to this rambling episode that went on and on and on. If you did make it all the way up to this point, then well done to you. And I've just noticed here on my desk, I've got a half-eaten piece of cake. I've got a half-eaten piece of cake. Now, sometimes what I do at the end of episodes is I will give you like a kind of little clue or keyword or a little sort of password or something to show that you've listened all the way through to the end. In the past, it's been other things, like I mentioned a story about a duck, you know, cleaning out a cooker that had been used to cook some ducks, like in this Chinese restaurant. And I said, if you listened all the way through to this point, leave a comment about a duck in the comments section. And lots of people were writing comments with the word duck in there in quite inventive ways in some cases. And I've done other passwords and stuff in the past, but today, try it. If you've reached this point in the episode, leave a comment that includes a reference to the word cake. Why is this half-eaten piece of cake here? Well, it's because yesterday, what happened was I went for lunch and I brought lunch back here with me, and I bought some cake to have as my dessert. And I ate half of it, and I planned to eat the other half after I'd finished recording the podcast, because I thought I would get this done yesterday afternoon. And I thought I'll leave that half and I'll enjoy eating it when I finished recording. But of course, it took much longer than I expected, and I didn't have time to eat the cake, and I couldn't bring it with me because I didn't have anything to put it in. And so this cake has just been sitting there for 24 hours now. 23 hours now. This cake's just been sitting there, and I would eat it, but it's kind of gone a little bit stale. I'm not sure I should eat it. I didn't keep it in the fridge. I didn't keep it covered in a box. So this is a sad story of this half-eaten piece of cake that's been left on my desk overnight, abandoned, because I had to record the podcast and then rush off to go and pick up my son. So this poor piece of cake never got eaten. Maybe the cake's glad. Maybe it's like, yay, I didn't get eaten. Yeah, hey, fantastic, I survived. The one piece of cake that survived. But leave a comment if you got to this point in the episode and mention the word cake in your comment. You could, for example, say, well, Luke, I reached the end. It was a piece of cake, or listening to this episode all the way to the end was a piece of cake for me, Luke, because that is, of course, an idiom, right? A common idiom that we use in English. If you say that something is a piece of cake, it means it's really easy. So listening through to the end of this episode was a piece of cake. Or maybe you could say it wasn't a piece of cake, Luke, to listen to this, but like that piece of cake that's been left half eaten on your desk, I've just been waiting for someone to finish me off. Maybe that's what you've been doing. I don't know. But anyway, mention cake in your comment. You could say that listening to the episode or getting to the end of the episode was a piece of cake, or maybe it wasn't. I don't know. Maybe you've just been hanging on by your fingernails this whole time. Thank you so much in any case for listening, and I hope that you've enjoyed the episode. I hope you've enjoyed hanging out with me during this time. Okay. All right. Stop raining, and there's a bit of blue sky out there. A band of blue sky in the distance, which is a promising sign. Maybe the sun's going to come out. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching, if you did indeed watch the episode. And I'll speak to you next time. All right? But for now, it's just time to say goodbye. Bye. 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 Bye.